All eyes landed on the black woman in the maid's uniform. Her hands moved in sign language, fingers forming words that made the elderly deaf woman gasp and the billionaire freeze mid-breath. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged confused glances. But the 28-year-old maid didn't stop signing. She'd seen things. To understand how an invisible maid became the only one who could see the truth, how a 15-year friendship was actually a revenge plot, and how a mother's love became a weapon, we need to go back 2 weeks, to the October morning when Keisha Loran walked through those mansion doors for the very first time. Welcome, my beautiful family. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. Trevor Hastings stood at the windows of his corner office on the 42nd floor of Hastings Technologies, watching rain hammer the city below. His reflection stared back, 32 years old, honey brown hair darker where water had caught it during his run from the car, tie already loosened at 9 a.m. The merger documents sat unsigned on his desk. 73 pages that would either save his company or bury it. His phone buzzed. Mom's visit tomorrow. Don't forget. He hadn't forgotten. Dorothy came the second Thursday of every month like clockwork. Tea at 3. Dinner at 7. Breakfast the next morning. Then she'd return to her townhouse in Cambridge, and Trevor would return to whatever crisis demanded him. He loved his mother. He did. But her visits felt like pausing a video game in the middle of battle. Necessary, but inconvenient. You look like death warmed over. Brandon Cole dropped into the leather chair opposite Trevor's desk, balancing 2 coffee cups. He set one in front of Trevor without asking if he wanted it. That was Brandon. Always knowing. Always there. The Kellerman Group filed an amended offer, Trevor said. They're going hostile. Let them. Brandon stretched his legs, his gray suit fitting him like he'd been born wearing it. Sandy blonde hair perfectly styled even in October rain. We've got patents they need. They're bluffing. They've got 3 board members ready to flip. 2. Patterson's loyal. Brandon sipped his coffee. You need to sleep. You look worse than you did during finals week. They'd met freshman year at MIT. Brandon had a scholarship and a chip on his shoulder. Trevor had a trust fund and undiagnosed anxiety. Somehow they'd balanced each other. Brandon's hunger meeting Trevor's resources, Trevor's ethics tempering Brandon's ruthlessness. 15 years later, Brandon served as COO while Trevor fought to keep their company from being carved up by vultures. Mom's coming tomorrow, Trevor said. Brandon's face softened. Dorothy. How is she? Same. You know she asks about you constantly. Wants to know when you're settling down, having kids, the usual interrogation. Tell her I'm waiting for someone as wonderful as her. Brandon grinned, but something flickered behind his blue eyes. Sadness, maybe. Brandon never talked about his parents. Trevor knew his father had gone to prison when Brandon was young, that his mother had disappeared after. Dorothy had stepped into that void during college, treating Brandon like the second son she'd never had. Trevor's actual sister had died young. Brandon filled that emptiness too. You should come by tomorrow, Trevor said. She'd love to see you. Can't. Meeting with the patent lawyers. Brandon stood, squeezed Trevor's shoulder. But give her my love. Tell her I'll call this weekend. After Brandon left, Trevor turned back to the windows. Rain blurred the city into watercolor smudges. Somewhere down there, his mother prepared for her monthly visit. Somewhere else, competitors schemed to take everything he'd built. And somewhere in between, Trevor tried to hold it all together by pretending exhaustion didn't live in his bones. His phone buzzed again. New staff member starts today. Mrs. Howell's text included no additional details. The housekeeper ran the estate like a military base. Trevor trusted her completely, which meant he thought about household staff approximately never. He should care more. He knew that. But caring required energy he didn't have. The merger documents waited. Trevor signed the first page with his father's pen, the gold Mont Blanc that had built empires and buried enemies. Outside, rain fell harder. Inside, Trevor did what he always did. He kept working. That same day at 6:47 a.m., Keisha Loron stood in her bathroom, braiding her natural hair into a crown that would last 3 days. Her reflection showed a 28-year-old black woman with deep brown skin, dark eyes that had learned young to watch everything, and shoulders that carried more than they should. The white blouse and black pencil skirt hung on her closet door, the uniform Mrs. Howell had specified. Simple. Invisible. Perfect. Her phone sat on the sink, showing a text from her cousin Janelle. "You sure about this job? Rich white people give me hives." Keisha had been sure about nothing since Marcus died. Her little brother had been 12, deaf since birth, full of joy that signed itself through his flying hands. The asthma attack had come fast. The paramedics had come faster. But nobody knew ASL. Nobody understood his panicked signs. By the time they figured out his inhaler was in his backpack, by the time they stopped asking questions he couldn't answer, Marcus had stopped breathing. That was 6 years ago. Keisha had learned every sign, studied until her hands ached, attended deaf community events until ASL felt like breathing. Then she'd stopped. Because every sign reminded her of Marcus laughing. Every gesture was a ghost. But the money was good. Hastings paid twice what her last position offered, and Keisha needed to eat. She'd cleaned houses since high school. Rich people rarely noticed the help. That suited her fine. Being invisible meant staying safe. She finished her hair, applied minimal makeup, checked that her earrings were small and plain. Nothing that could be called too much or unprofessional. Those words that white supervisors used when they meant, "We notice you're black and we don't like it." The bus to Brookline took 40 minutes. Keisha spent them watching Boston wake up through rain-streaked windows. Students rushing to classes. Business people clutching briefcases. Regular people living regular lives. She used to want more than regular. Now she just wanted steady. The Hastings estate sat behind iron gates in the kind of neighborhood where even the trees looked expensive. October had turned the maples brilliant red and burnt orange. The main house spread across perfectly maintained lawns, 3 stories of old money and new tech, brick and glass and security cameras everywhere. Keisha counted 6 cameras just walking from the gate to the service entrance. More than most houses. Fewer than there should be. She'd learned to notice things like that. Gaps in security. Patterns in behavior. People revealed themselves in small moments, a racist joke told when they thought no black people were listening, a hand that moved too fast near a woman's body, eyes that lingered where they shouldn't. Keisha had survived by watching. Mrs. Howell opened the service door before Keisha could knock. 50-something, steel-gray hair pulled into a bun so tight it probably gave her headaches, green eyes that missed nothing. Irish accent still thick after decades in America. "You're early." "Good." Mrs. Howell stepped aside. "I don't tolerate lateness. I don't tolerate gossip. You clean what I tell you to clean. You speak when spoken to, and you remember that Mr. Hastings values privacy above everything." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." The family doesn't need to know your life story. They don't need to hear your opinions. You're here to work, not make friends. Mrs. Howell's gaze swept over Keisha like a security scan. "Your references checked out, but I'll be watching your first month closely. Any problems, you're gone. Clear. Crystal." Mrs. Howell led her through the service corridors. The house smelled like lemon polish and money. Everything gleamed, marble floors, cream-colored walls hung with art Keisha recognized from textbooks, furniture that cost more than her car. They passed a sitting room where morning light caught crystal vases and made rainbows on the walls. "Mr. Hastings is rarely home," Mrs. Howell said. "When he is, stay out of his way. His mother visits monthly. She's deaf. We communicate through notes or Mr. Hastings translates when he's available. Don't try to talk to her. It only confuses things." Keisha's hands twitched. She folded them behind her back. "Master Suite is off limits unless I specifically send you to clean it. Mr. Hastings's study is never to be entered. Guest suites on the 3rd floor need daily attention. Mrs. Hastings, the mother, stays in the blue guest room when she visits. She arrives tomorrow." They entered a massive kitchen where 2 other staff members prepped breakfast. A young white woman chopping fruit. An older Latino man working the stove. Neither looked up. "This is Keisha," Mrs. Howell announced. "She'll be handling the third floor and assisting with service as needed." The woman glanced over. The man nodded without pausing his work. This was how it went. Keisha would be background noise. Furniture with hands. Mrs. Howell handed her a supply caddy. "Start with the guest suites. Strip the beds, dust everything, vacuum thoroughly. Mrs. Hastings has allergies, so we use fragrance-free products. Leave fresh flowers in the blue room. She loves flowers." "Yes, ma'am." "And Keisha," Mrs. Howell's voice dropped, "I read in your file that you have some college education. Whatever dreams you had about being more than service staff, leave them at the door. Mr. Hastings is brilliant, successful, and completely out of your league. I've seen girls like you before. Don't get ideas." Heat flooded Keisha's face. "I'm here to work, Mrs. Howell. Nothing else." "Good. Keep it that way." Keisha climbed the back stairs to the third floor, anger sitting hot in her throat. "Girls like you." As if Keisha had come here hunting a rich husband instead of rent money. As if wanting a degree she couldn't afford made her dangerous. The blue guest room took her breath away despite her anger. Tall windows framed views of the garden. A four-poster bed dressed in soft gray linens. Antique furniture that belonged in museums. And on the nightstand, a worn ASL dictionary, its pages flagged with sticky notes. Keisha picked it up. The notes were in neat handwriting. "Good morning. I love you. Please. Thank you." Someone had been trying to learn. Not very hard, the book looked barely used, but trying. Next to it sat a silver-framed photo. A woman with silver-streaked chestnut hair and kind brown eyes, standing beside a younger Trevor Hastings. Both of them signing something to the camera. The woman's smile reached her whole face. Trevor looked awkward, his hands stiff and uncertain. Dorothy Hastings. The deaf mother who got notes instead of conversation. The woman nobody tried to talk to because it was easier not to. Keisha set down the dictionary and the photo. Her hands remembered signs she hadn't made in years. Marcus had signed with his whole body. Joy and anger and love flowing through his fingers like music. Dorothy Hastings probably signed the same way. And she came to this house once a month to sit with people who couldn't be bothered to really speak with her. Something twisted in Keisha's chest. Not quite anger. Not quite sadness. Something older and harder that tasted like recognition. She'd come here to be invisible. To clean and collect a paycheck and go home. But looking at that photo, at Dorothy's genuine smile and Trevor's distant awkwardness, Keisha felt something shift. Maybe invisible wasn't safe. Maybe invisible meant missing what mattered. She started stripping the bed, working methodically, and tried not to think about the security cameras she'd counted. 6 outside. None here in the guest wing where Dorothy would sleep. That gap bothered her more than it should. Downstairs, a door opened and closed. Male voices drifted up. Trevor and someone else, laughing about something. The other voice sounded warm, easy, like honey poured over gravel. Footsteps crossed the marble floor below. Keisha moved to the window to shake out the duvet. In the circular driveway, a black Mercedes sat beside Trevor's Tesla. And leaning against the Mercedes, typing on his phone with a smile that didn't match his eyes, stood a man in a gray suit. He looked up suddenly, as if sensing her watching. His gaze locked on her third-floor window. The smile didn't waver. But something in his stillness made Keisha step back from the glass. She didn't know his name yet. Didn't know he was Brandon Cole, the best friend, the chosen brother, the man Dorothy loved like a son. But she knew danger when it looked at her. And danger had just seen her looking back. The Mercedes arrived exactly on time. Keisha watched from the second-floor landing as Raymond, the head of security, opened the passenger door. Dorothy Hastings emerged like grace itself, wrapped in a plum-colored cardigan over cream slacks, her silver-streaked hair catching afternoon light. She moved slowly, taking in the autumn garden with obvious pleasure, touching the chrysanthemums that lined the walkway. Trevor burst through the front door, phone pressed to his ear. He wrapped his free arm around his mother in a quick hug, still talking. Something about patent filings and deadlines. Dorothy's smile dimmed. She pulled back and signed something. Trevor nodded without looking at her hands, his attention already elsewhere. Mom, I'm sorry, this call is critical. Trevor kissed her forehead. Mrs. Howell has tea ready. I'll join you in an hour. I promise. He disappeared back inside before Dorothy could respond. She stood alone in the doorway, the smile completely gone now. Raymond carried her overnight bag up the steps, nodded politely, and left. Dorothy remained still, hands at her sides, surrounded by wealth and care and utterly isolated. Keisha felt it like a punch. This woman traveled 40 minutes to see her son and got a distracted hug and empty promises. She descended the stairs carefully, trying to decide if she should just walk past or acknowledge Dorothy somehow. Mrs. Howell's warning echoed. Don't try to talk to her. It only confuses things. But Dorothy turned and saw her. Their eyes met. Dorothy's face shifted with something like hope, like she expected Keisha to see her as human. Most people didn't hold that hope in their eyes anymore. Keisha made her decision. She set down the supply caddy and brought her hands up slowly. Her fingers shaped the signs carefully, muscle memory waking after 6 years of sleep. Welcome home. Beautiful day. Dorothy's whole face transformed. Her hands flew up in response, signing so fast Keisha almost missed it. You know ASL? Oh my goodness, you sign. A little, Keisha signed back, her hands shaky but accurate. I'm Keisha. I work here. I'm Dorothy. Her signs were fluid, natural, full of warmth. I can't believe this. Nobody here signs. Well, Trevor knows some, but he's always so busy. And Brandon tries, but he learned from YouTube videos and gets half of it wrong. She laughed silently, her joy physical and radiant. Keisha's heart clenched. This was dangerous. Getting close to Dorothy meant getting noticed. Getting noticed meant getting fired when Mrs. Howell found out. But Dorothy's hands kept moving, asking questions about where Keisha learned, how long she'd been working here, did she like Boston. They talked for 10 minutes in the foyer. Dorothy described her townhouse in Cambridge, her book club where she was the only deaf member and they forgot to face her when speaking half the time. She signed about her garden, her pottery class, the documentary she'd watched about octopuses. Normal things. Human things. Things nobody else probably asked her about because conversation took effort. I should let you work, Dorothy signed finally, reluctance clear. But thank you. You have no idea what it means to actually talk to someone. Any time, Keisha signed. I'm here all week. Dorothy squeezed Keisha's hand, her grip warm and real, then headed toward the sitting room where Mrs. Howell had prepared tea. Keisha picked up her caddy, pulse racing. She'd just done exactly what Mrs. Howell warned against. But the joy on Dorothy's face made it worth whatever consequences came. She was halfway up the stairs when she felt it. That prickling awareness of being watched. She turned. Brandon Cole stood in the hallway outside Trevor's study, half hidden in shadow. He'd appeared without sound, without warning. His blue eyes fixed on Keisha with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Not angry. Not suspicious. Something colder. Calculating. He smiled slowly and walked toward the sitting room where Dorothy had gone. His footsteps made no sound on the marble floor. Keisha forced herself to keep climbing. Don't react. Don't show fear. Just another maid doing her job. But her hands trembled as she gripped the caddy handle. In the sitting room below, she heard Brandon's voice, warm and loud enough to carry. Dorothy! I had to stop by. I couldn't let you visit without saying hello. Keisha paused at the 3rd floor landing, listening. Dorothy must have responded somehow because Brandon laughed. Trevor's drowning in this merger. But you know I'd make time for my favorite person. Come here. The sound of movement. A hug, probably. Brandon's voice dropped lower, intimate. I brought those lavender tea cookies you love. The ones from that bakery in Cambridge. More sounds. The clink of teacups. Mrs. Howell's voice offering to bring fresh scones. Brandon settling in like he belonged there, like Dorothy was his mother too. Keisha entered the blue guest room and started her work, but her mind stayed downstairs. Something about Brandon's appearance bothered her. The timing. The way he'd watched her sign with Dorothy. The way he'd smiled like he'd just learned something useful. She stripped the bed she'd made yesterday and found fresh linens in the hall closet. As she worked, she noticed something she'd missed before. A tiny hole in the crown molding above the bed. No bigger than a pencil eraser. Could be a nail hole from old artwork. Could be something else. Keisha pulled a chair over and climbed up for a closer look. The hole was too clean, too perfectly round. And when she got close enough, she saw the faint glint of a lens. A camera, pointed directly at the bed. Her stomach dropped. She stepped down carefully, mind racing. Maybe it was standard security. Rich people had cameras everywhere, right? But she'd counted the security setup yesterday. 6 cameras outside. 2 in the main hallways. None in the private guest wing. Raymond ran a tight operation. He wouldn't install cameras in guest bedrooms. The privacy violation alone could destroy them legally, which meant someone else put it there. Keisha finished making the bed with hands that wanted to shake. She needed to tell someone. But who? Mrs. Howell wouldn't believe her. Trevor was unreachable. Raymond was her best bet, but if she was wrong, if this was somehow legitimate, she'd look paranoid. She compromised. After finishing the room, she found Raymond in the security office near the kitchen, watching multiple monitor feeds. Mr. Raymond? She kept her voice casual. Question about the cameras. Do we have any in the guest bedrooms? Raymond looked up, his dark eyes sharp. Former Secret Service, according to Mrs. Howell. He carried himself like someone who'd seen things. No. Never. Why? Just wondering about coverage. Mrs. Hastings is here and I want to make sure she's safe. Guest wing has no cameras. Mr. Hastings is strict about privacy. Raymond studied her face. You see something concerning? Yes. Keisha wanted to scream. But she swallowed it. No, sir. Just being thorough. You notice anything unusual, you come to me directly. Understood. Not Mrs. Howell. Me. Yes, sir. Raymond held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded. Good instincts. Keep them sharp. Keisha left before he could ask more questions. So the camera wasn't official security, which meant someone had unauthorized surveillance in Dorothy's bedroom. Someone who wanted to watch her. Someone who had access to the house and knew the security gaps. She thought about Brandon appearing in the hallway. Brandon watching her sign with Dorothy. Brandon in the sitting room now, performing devoted son. No proof. Just instinct. But Keisha's instincts had kept her alive in places where being wrong meant worse than getting fired. She returned to the 3rd floor and continued her work, cleaning the other guests' suites with mechanical efficiency while her brain worked through possibilities. Maybe she was paranoid. Maybe grief over Marcus had broken something in her that saw danger everywhere. Maybe she should shut up and collect her paycheck and let rich people handle their own problems. But then she remembered Dorothy's isolated smile. The way Trevor had hugged her without really seeing her. The way this whole house treated her like a beloved inconvenience instead of a person. Keisha knew what it felt like to be invisible. She wouldn't let Dorothy be hurt while everyone else looked away. At 5 o'clock, she finished her shift and started toward the service stairs. Voices drifted from the main sitting room. Trevor had finally made it to tea. His voice exhausted but warm. Mom, I'm sorry. Today was chaos. Dorothy must have signed something because Trevor laughed. Yes, Brandon stayed to keep you company. See, I knew he'd take care of you. Always. Brandon's voice, smooth as butter. Dorothy knows she's family. Keisha paused at the top of the stairs. Family. The word should have sounded warm. Instead, it sounded like a claim. Like ownership. She descended quietly, collected her coat from the service entrance, and stepped into October evening. The sun hung low, turning the sky orange and pink. Beautiful day, she'd signed to Dorothy. It had been. But beauty didn't mean safe. Her bus pulled up as she reached the stop. Keisha climbed aboard and found a seat, exhaustion settling into her bones. Through the window, she could see the Hastings estate growing smaller. Lights glowed in the windows. From outside, it looked warm, welcoming. Inside, someone had put a camera in Dorothy's bedroom. Inside, Brandon Cole smiled while he calculated something Keisha couldn't see yet. Inside, Trevor Hastings loved his mother but didn't know how to protect her from threats he couldn't imagine. Keisha pulled out her phone and typed a note to herself. Camera in blue room. Brandon arrived same day as Dorothy. Raymond suspects nothing. Find out more about Brandon Cole. The bus carried her toward Roxbury, toward her small apartment and leftover pasta and an empty evening. Tomorrow she'd return. Tomorrow she'd watch more carefully. Tomorrow she'd figure out if she was crazy or if Dorothy Hastings needed someone to actually see the danger circling her. 6 years ago, Keisha had watched her brother die because nobody understood his signs fast enough. She'd carried that failure ever since, a weight that made her shoulders ache. She wouldn't fail again. Not while her hands still remembered how to speak for those the world refused to hear. The bus rumbled through evening traffic. Behind her, the Hastings estate disappeared into darkness. Ahead, Keisha went home to prepare for whatever came next. She didn't know yet that Brandon had photographed her signing with Dorothy. Didn't know he'd already sent the image to someone with instructions. Didn't know that her decision to acknowledge Dorothy had just made her a problem that needed solving. But she'd learn soon enough. Everyone would. Keisha arrived early, nerves wound tight. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning through scenarios about the camera. In the cold light of morning, her certainty from yesterday felt thinner. Maybe she'd seen it wrong. Maybe the tiny hole was just a defect in the molding. Maybe she was inventing problems because her life felt more manageable when she had something concrete to fight against. Raymond stood near the service entrance, talking quietly with another security guard. Keisha caught the tail end of their conversation. Perimeter is clean. Nothing on overnight footage, the guard said. Good. Keep the rotation tight while Mrs. Hastings is here. Raymond dismissed the guard and turned to Keisha. Morning. You're early. Wanted to get a head start. She hesitated, then made herself continue. Mr. Raymond, yesterday I mentioned cameras. I think I might have seen something in the blue guest room. A lens, maybe. In the crown molding above the bed. Raymond's expression sharpened. Show me. Relief flooded through her. He believed her enough to check. They climbed the service stairs together, his presence solid and reassuring. In the blue guest room, early light streamed through the windows. Everything looked innocent. Beautiful, even. Keisha pulled the chair over and pointed to the tiny hole she'd found yesterday. Raymond climbed up, examined it closely. His jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, angled it into the hole. Then he stepped down, his face carefully neutral. That's a finishing nail hole from when they hung artwork 5 years ago. I supervised that installation myself. He met her eyes. I appreciate your vigilance, but there's no camera there. Keisha's certainty crumbled. But I saw something reflective. Like a lens. Sometimes paint or dust catches light strangely. His tone wasn't unkind, but it was final. The security system here is extensive and documented. If there were unauthorized devices, I'd know. Trust me on that. I just thought, with Mrs. Hastings being vulnerable and the takeover happening, maybe someone might try something. Your concern is noted. Raymond guided her toward the door. But creating security scares without evidence helps no one. Understood. Shame burned in her chest. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be certain before you raise alarms. He paused at the doorway. And Keisha? Focus on your job. Let me handle security. After he left, Keisha stood alone in the blue guest room, doubt eating at her. Had she imagined the lens? Was grief making her see threats that didn't exist? Mrs. Howell's warning echoed. Girls like you. Maybe this was exactly what the housekeeper meant. Keisha inventing drama to make herself important, to be more than just the help. She forced herself to start cleaning, to fall into the rhythm of work that didn't require thinking. But her hands shook as she dusted the nightstand, as she straightened the ASL dictionary that Dorothy had used last night. Downstairs, voices drifted up. Trevor and Brandon in the study, their conversation intense but muffled by the heavy door. Keisha moved to the hallway, ostensibly to vacuum, but really to listen. "The board meeting is Friday," Trevor said, his voice tight with stress. "If we don't have the votes by then, Kellerman gets what they want. You have Patterson and Lou. That's two." Brandon's voice stayed calm, controlled. "Morrison is waiting to see which way the wind blows. Convince her and we're golden. Morrison hates me. She's been gunning for my position since Dad died. Morrison is practical. Show her the numbers. The projections. Make it clear that siding with Kellerman means losing everything she's built here too." A pause. Then Trevor, quieter. "What would I do without you? Crash and burn, probably." Brandon laughed. "Good thing you're stuck with me. Mom asked about you at breakfast. Wanted to know when you're coming for dinner again. Tell Dorothy I'll come Sunday. I'll bring those apple tarts she loves from the French bakery on Newberry Street. She adores you, you know. Sometimes I think she likes you more than me." "Impossible. You're her son. I'm just the charity case she took pity on in college." Brandon's tone carried self-deprecation, but something else lived underneath. Something harder. "Don't say that. You're family. You've always been family." The study door opened suddenly. Keisha jerked her attention to the vacuum, flipping it on. Brandon emerged first, adjusting his navy tie, his expression pleasant and empty. He glanced at Keisha without recognition, like she was furniture, and headed toward the stairs. Trevor followed, phone already pressed to his ear. Neither man acknowledged her. Keisha finished the hallway and moved to the library, a massive room lined with books nobody read. Through the windows, she could see Dorothy in the garden, bundled in a wheat-colored coat, examining the rose bushes. Alone again. Trevor had eaten breakfast with her, but left the moment his phone rang. Brandon had stayed long enough for coffee, then disappeared into meetings. The isolation looked like neglect. But maybe that was just how rich families worked. Maybe Keisha was projecting her own need for connection onto people who had different expectations. She was shelving books when Mrs. Howell appeared in the doorway, her face set in disapproving lines. "Mr. Raymond tells me you reported a security concern this morning." Mrs. Howell's Irish accent sharpened with irritation. "A camera that doesn't exist." "I thought I saw something." "You thought wrong. Do you understand how serious false alarms are? Mr. Raymond has actual security to manage. He doesn't need new staff wasting his time with paranoid fantasies." "I wasn't trying to cause problems. I was trying to protect Mrs. Hastings." "Mrs. Hastings doesn't need protection from you. She needs you to do your job and not create drama." Mrs. Howell stepped closer, her green eyes hard. "I warned you about getting ideas. Is this what you meant to do? Make yourself seem important by inventing crises?" "No, ma'am. Because if you can't handle working here without causing disruptions, I'll find someone who can. This is your first week. You're replaceable. Remember that." Mrs. Howell left, her footsteps sharp on the hardwood. Keisha stood among the books, humiliation and anger warring in her chest. She'd tried to do the right thing. She'd seen something, reported it, and now she was the problem. The hysterical black woman seeing danger everywhere. The help who didn't know her place. Maybe she should just shut up. Collect her paycheck. Let whatever was happening happen without her involvement. But then she remembered Dorothy's face yesterday when Keisha had signed to her. The pure joy of being seen. And she remembered Marcus, signing frantically while paramedics stood around him confused and useless. She remembered arriving at the hospital too late, remembered her mother's wails, remembered the guilt that never quite left. Keisha returned to the blue guest room during her lunch break. She stood on the chair again and examined the hole in the crown molding. In daylight, it did look like a nail hole. Raymond was probably right. She was probably wrong. But she took a photo anyway, just in case. Then she searched the rest of the room methodically. Behind picture frames. Under furniture. Inside lamp fixtures. She found nothing. No cameras. No surveillance equipment. Just expensive furniture and fresh flowers and her own paranoid imagination. Except, on the windowsill, partially hidden behind the curtain, she found a business card. Plain white, no name, just a phone number printed in black ink. It looked dropped, not placed. Like someone had pulled it from a pocket and it had fallen without them noticing. Keisha photographed the number, then left the card where she'd found it. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe Dorothy had dropped it. Maybe it belonged to Trevor or Mrs. Howell or any of the dozen people who moved through this house. But something about it felt wrong. The placement. The anonymity. The timing. She finished her shift in silence, avoiding Mrs. Howell, avoiding Raymond, doing her job exactly as directed. At 5 o'clock, she collected her coat and headed for the bus stop. The October evening had turned cold, the sky gray and threatening rain. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. First warning. Keisha's blood froze. She stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure she understood. Someone knew she'd talked to Raymond. Someone wanted her quiet. Someone was watching her. She looked back at the Hastings estate. Lights glowed warm in the windows. Dorothy was probably having dinner with Trevor, enjoying her son's distracted company. Brandon had left hours ago. Mrs. Howell was managing the kitchen. Raymond was monitoring security feeds. Everything looked normal. But someone had her phone number. Someone knew what she'd reported. Someone wanted her afraid enough to stop. Keisha deleted the message and boarded her bus. Her hands didn't shake anymore. The fear had burned through, leaving something colder behind. Something that remembered Marcus's death and refused to be silent about danger just because speaking up was inconvenient. She'd been right about the camera. Raymond was wrong, or lying, or blind. But she'd been right. Now she just had to prove it without getting fired. Or worse. The bus carried her home through the gathering dark. Keisha watched her reflection in the window and saw her brother's face overlapping hers. Marcus, who'd signed for help while strangers stood around unable to understand. Marcus, who died because the people who should have protected him didn't speak his language. Dorothy spoke ASL. Dorothy needed someone who could hear her properly. And Keisha's hands still remembered every sign. She pulled out her phone and typed the anonymous number into a search engine. Nothing came up. She tried a reverse lookup. Still nothing. The number was a ghost. But ghosts left traces. And Keisha had learned young how to find what people tried to hide. She'd find out who sent that text. She'd find out what they were hiding. She'd find out why someone wanted Dorothy Hastings watched. And she'd do it without anyone knowing she was looking. Because the thing about being invisible was this. People told their secrets around you. They dropped their guards. They forgot you could see and hear and think. Keisha had spent her whole life being underestimated. By teachers who thought she'd never finish high school. By bosses who saw her skin before her skills. By Mrs. Howell, who looked at her and saw nothing but ambition and threat. Let them underestimate her. Let them think she'd been scared into silence. Let them forget she existed. She'd been invisible before. She knew how to use it. The bus rumbled through Roxbury. Keisha got off at her stop and walked 3 blocks to her apartment building. The threatening text sat deleted but not forgotten. The business card number was saved in her photos. The camera hole in the crown molding existed whether Raymond believed it or not. Tomorrow she'd return. Tomorrow she'd smile and clean and keep her mouth shut like a good employee. But tomorrow night, she'd start digging. Because someone in that house was lying. Someone in that house had secrets. Someone in that house was watching Dorothy Hastings for reasons that required hidden cameras and threatening texts. And Keisha Loran had survived too much to let fear stop her from protecting someone who actually needed it. Even if that someone was a rich white woman who probably wouldn't believe her either. Even if fighting meant losing everything. Some things mattered more than safety. Dorothy's genuine smile yesterday had reminded Keisha why. Keisha woke to her phone buzzing with a weather alert. Winter storm warning. Heavy snow expected by noon. Continuing through the weekend. Massachusetts wasn't supposed to get hit this early in October, but climate change made a joke of seasonal expectations. She checked the forecast. 18 inches predicted. Travel advisories already in effect. She almost called in sick. The threatening text from yesterday still burned in her memory. But staying home meant leaving Dorothy alone in that house with whoever was watching her. Keisha dressed quickly, layered herself against the coming storm, and caught the early bus before conditions worsened. The first flakes started falling as she reached Brookline. Fat, heavy snow that meant business. By the time she reached the estate's service entrance, the world had turned white. Mrs. Howell met her at the door, looking harried. "You made it." "Good." The other day staff called out. "It'll be just you and me for cleaning until this storm passes. Raymond and 2 guards are staying on site. Mr. Hastings is here working from home." Mrs. Hastings extended her visit through the weekend because of the weather. "Yes, ma'am." Keisha shook snow from her coat. "And Mr. Cole will be staying as well. He was here for an early meeting and now the roads are too dangerous. We're essentially locked in until Sunday at minimum." Mrs. Howell handed Keisha a supply list. "Focus on keeping the main areas presentable. We'll do deep cleaning once the storm passes and regular staff returns." Brandon was staying. The information settled like ice in Keisha's stomach. She'd hoped to avoid him, to investigate quietly from the edges. Now they'd all be trapped together. She started her work on the second floor, but the house felt different today. Smaller. The storm outside pressed against the windows, turning morning into twilight. Inside, the light seemed too bright, the silence too heavy. Every sound carried. Every movement felt exposed. Around 10, Trevor gathered everyone in the main dining room. Dorothy, Brandon, Mrs. Howell, Raymond, the 2 security guards, and Keisha. 7 people cut off from the outside world by weather that showed no signs of stopping. "I know this isn't ideal," Trevor said, standing at the head of the table while snow piled against the windows behind him. "But we're safe, we have power and provisions, and we'll make the best of it. Mom's thrilled to have an extended visit." He smiled at Dorothy, who sat beside him wearing a soft blue sweater that matched her eyes. Dorothy signed something. Trevor looked to Brandon automatically. "What did she say?" Brandon watched Dorothy's hands and translated. "She says it reminds her of when you were little and snow days meant hot chocolate and board games." "We can do that," Trevor said, his voice warming. "Tonight. Family game night. Brandon, you're not escaping." "Wouldn't dream of it." Brandon's smile looked genuine. He sat on Dorothy's other side, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Dorothy and I will team up and destroy you like always." Dorothy laughed silently and signed something else. This time Trevor tried to follow. "You want cookies?" "Baking." "She wants to bake those ginger cookies she makes every Christmas," Brandon said. "The ones with the crystallized sugar on top." "How do you know that?" Trevor asked. "She told me last month. We talked about holiday traditions." Brandon squeezed Dorothy's hand. "I remember everything you tell me." Something flickered across Trevor's face. Guilt, maybe. Or jealousy. Keisha watched from her position near the kitchen door, officially there to assist Mrs. Howell but really there to observe. "Mrs. Howell, do we have baking supplies?" Trevor asked. "Of course, Mr. Hastings." "Then it's settled. Mom, you and Mrs. Howell commandeer the kitchen this afternoon." Trevor turned to Raymond. "Security status?" "All systems operational. Perimeter cameras are functional despite the snow. We're locked down tight." Raymond's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Keisha before moving on. The meeting dispersed. Trevor returned to his study for video conferences. The security guards resumed their posts. Mrs. Howell and Dorothy headed to the kitchen, Dorothy's face bright with purpose. Brandon lingered in the dining room, checking his phone, his expression distant. Keisha started clearing the coffee service. As she reached for Brandon's cup, he looked up suddenly, their eyes meeting. His gaze held hers for a long moment. Not threatening, just watching, calculating something she couldn't read. "You're the new maid," he said. Not a question. Yes, sir. Keisha, I saw you talking with Dorothy the other day. With your hands. He set his phone down. You know sign language. Some. My brother was deaf. Past tense. The truth slipped out before she could stop it. Was. Brandon caught the tense. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Keisha gathered the cups onto her tray, wanting to escape. It must mean a lot to Dorothy, having someone here who can actually communicate with her. His tone stayed friendly, conversational, but something underneath felt like a test. Trevor tries, but he's always so busy. And I know some signs, but I'm not fluent like you clearly are. Mrs. Hastings is very kind. She is. She treats everyone like family, sometimes too much. She doesn't always see when people might take advantage of that kindness. Brandon stood, smoothing his charcoal slacks. But I watch out for her. Someone has to. The words landed like a warning wrapped in concern. Keisha met his eyes again, refusing to look away first. That's good. Everyone should have someone watching out for them. Exactly. Brandon smiled, all warmth and charm. I'm glad we understand each other. He left, his footsteps silent on the carpet. Keisha carried the tray to the kitchen, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. That conversation had been a threat. Polite, subtle, but absolutely a threat. Brandon knew she could communicate with Dorothy. He just told her to back off without saying it directly. Which meant she was right. Something was wrong. And Brandon Cole was part of it. In the kitchen, Dorothy and Mrs. Howell measured flour and sugar, working side by side in companionable silence. Dorothy saw Keisha and signed a greeting, her hands dusted white with flour. Join us. I should work, Keisha signed back. Please. Baking is better with friends. Dorothy's smile was so genuine, so hopeful, that Keisha couldn't refuse. Mrs. Howell frowned but said nothing. The storm had created a strange democracy. Normal rules bent under the weight of forced proximity. Keisha washed her hands and joined them, following Dorothy's signed instructions for measuring ingredients, creaming butter and sugar, rolling dough into perfect spheres. Dorothy's hands moved constantly, signing commentary about the recipe, about her mother teaching her to bake, about how Trevor used to steal raw dough when he was small. Mrs. Howell worked quietly, not understanding the signs but softening slightly in Dorothy's presence. Even the stern housekeeper couldn't fully resist Dorothy's warmth. Your son loves you very much, Keisha signed during a quiet moment when Mrs. Howell had stepped away. Dorothy's hands stilled. I know. But love and attention are different things. Trevor gives me one but not the other. Her signs carried sadness. Brandon makes time. He remembers small things. Sometimes I wonder if I'm a burden to Trevor but a joy to Brandon. You're not a burden to anyone. You're kind to say so. Dorothy shaped another cookie, her movements precise. Brandon is like a second son. When Trevor brought him home from college, this lost boy with no family, I just wanted to help. Now he's as much mine as Trevor is. She paused, her hands hovering. Is that wrong? To love someone else's child as much as your own? Love isn't wrong, Keisha signed. But sometimes people we love surprise us. Dorothy studied her face. You see something I don't. Keisha's breath caught. Dorothy's brown eyes were sharp, intelligent, missing nothing. This woman wasn't naive. She was isolated, not stupid. I see someone who cares about you very much, Keisha signed carefully. I see someone who wants you safe. But you also see something that worries you. Dorothy's hands moved slowly, deliberately. I may be deaf, Keisha, but I'm not blind. I see how you watch. I see how careful you are. What do you see when you look at my family? Before Keisha could answer, Brandon entered the kitchen. Something smells amazing in here. He approached Dorothy, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Are you teaching Keisha your secret recipes? Should I be jealous? Dorothy relaxed into his embrace, signing something with floury hands. Brandon laughed. She says there's enough love to go around. He met Keisha's eyes over Dorothy's head. The message was clear. Back off. Keisha excused herself to continue her cleaning duties. The house felt smaller by the hour. Snow piled against the windows, 3 feet deep now and still falling. The power flickered once, twice, but held. In the study, Trevor's voice rose and fell with phone negotiations. The security guards rotated shifts. Mrs. Howell prepared lunch. And Keisha watched. She watched Brandon position himself near Dorothy constantly. She watched him steer conversations, control information flow, play the devoted son while Trevor played the distracted one. She watched Dorothy's face light up when Brandon entered rooms. She watched Trevor's guilt every time he had to step away for work. The dynamics were almost perfect. Brandon had positioned himself as irreplaceable. The good son. The one who paid attention. The one Dorothy would trust over her own instincts. By late afternoon, Trevor insisted on family time despite his meetings. They gathered in the main sitting room with hot chocolate and the fresh cookies. Dorothy taught Trevor more ASL, using Brandon as her demonstration partner since he knew more signs. Trevor struggled, laughing at his own mistakes. Brandon signed fluidly, showing off without seeming to. When did you learn so much? Trevor asked, watching Brandon sign a complex sentence. Online courses. YouTube videos. Dorothy deserves someone who can really talk to her. Brandon squeezed Dorothy's hand. She's worth the effort. The guilt on Trevor's face was painful to watch. Keisha understood Brandon's strategy now. He wasn't just positioning himself as the better son. He was making Trevor feel like a failure, driving a wedge through love itself. That evening, they played board games like Dorothy had wanted. Monopoly, because apparently rich people found pretend real estate entertaining. Dorothy and Brandon partnered against Trevor and Raymond, who'd been pulled into the game by Trevor's insistence that everyone participate. Even Mrs. Howell joined for one round before retreating to the kitchen. Keisha served drinks and snacks, officially working but really watching. Brandon's hand on Dorothy's shoulder. Trevor's distraction even during family time, his phone buzzing constantly. Dorothy's joy at having people around her, people who seemed to care. And underneath it all, the storm raged. Snow buried the cars in the driveway. Wind rattled the windows. The outside world disappeared, leaving only these 7 people trapped together in forced intimacy. Around 9, Trevor's phone rang with a crisis that couldn't wait. He apologized and disappeared into his study. Raymond followed to discuss something security-related. Mrs. Howell retired for the night, exhausted from unexpected hosting, which left Dorothy, Brandon, and Keisha in the sitting room. Dorothy yawned, sign that she was heading to bed. Brandon helped her stand, ever attentive. Sleep well. I'll see you at breakfast. Dorothy hugged him, then surprised Keisha by hugging her too. Thank you for today. For baking with me. For seeing me. After Dorothy left, Brandon turned to Keisha. They stood alone in the sitting room, the storm howling outside, the rest of the house quiet. She trusts you, Brandon said quietly. That's dangerous. Why would trust be dangerous? Because trust makes people vulnerable. And vulnerability gets exploited. He moved closer, not threatening but deliberate. I've protected Dorothy for 15 years. I won't let anyone hurt her. Not competitors trying to use her against Trevor. Not well-meaning staff who don't understand the risks. Not anyone. I would never hurt her. Maybe not intentionally. But drawing attention to her, making her visible, that's its own kind of danger. Brandon's blue eyes held hers. Trevor has enemies. Real ones. The kind who would use a lonely deaf woman to get what they want. So I need you to understand something. Dorothy's safety requires her staying exactly as she is. Isolated. Protected. Mine to watch over. The possessiveness in that last word made Keisha's skin crawl. She's not property. She's family. My family. And I take care of what's mine. Brandon stepped back, his expression smoothing into pleasant neutrality. Good night, Keisha. Enjoy the rest of your evening. The storm should break by Sunday. Then everything can go back to normal. He left, climbing the stairs to the guest room Trevor had prepared for him. Keisha stood alone in the sitting room, her heart hammering. Brandon had just told her his plan without realizing it. Keep Dorothy isolated. Keep her dependent. Keep her his. But why? What did he gain from controlling Dorothy's relationships? Unless control was just the beginning. Unless Dorothy was leverage waiting to be used. Unless Brandon wasn't the devoted son at all, but something far more dangerous wearing a son's face. Keisha checked the windows. Snow still fell in sheets, burying the world. They were locked in here together. Brandon, getting more comfortable showing his real face. Dorothy, trusting and vulnerable. Trevor, blind to the truth. And Keisha, the only one who saw clearly. 3 more days of this storm. 3 more days trapped with a man who just revealed exactly how much he wanted Dorothy under his control. 3 more days to figure out what Brandon Cole was really planning. Before someone got hurt. Before Dorothy's trust became the weapon that destroyed her. Keisha couldn't sleep. The storm had quieted to a steady whisper against the windows, but her mind raced too fast for rest. Mrs. Howell had offered her the small staff bedroom on the first floor rather than send her home in dangerous conditions. Now she lay in the narrow bed, staring at ceiling shadows, replaying Brandon's words. Dorothy's safety requires her staying exactly as she is. Isolated. Protected. Mine to watch over. The possessiveness haunted her. The certainty. The threat wrapped in concern. She pulled out her phone, keeping the brightness low. The business card she'd photographed from Dorothy's room still sat in her camera roll. Anonymous number. No name. She'd tried searching it days ago with no results. But now, trapped in this house with time and motivation, she tried again. Different search engines. Reverse lookup sites. Finally, a paid service that promised unlisted number identification. She entered her credit card information, knowing she couldn't afford the charge but doing it anyway. Sometimes the truth cost more than staying ignorant. The results loaded. The number belonged to a prepaid phone purchased at a convenience store in South Boston 3 weeks ago. No registered owner. But the search also showed other numbers that had called it. One of them had a name attached. Vanessa Cole. Keisha's breath stopped. Cole. Brandon's last name. She searched Vanessa Cole and found a LinkedIn profile. Marketing executive at Kellerman Industries. The company trying to take over Hastings Technologies. Brandon's sister worked for Trevor's enemies. Her hands shook as she dug deeper. Vanessa's profile showed she'd worked at 3 different tech companies over the past 5 years. All of them competitors to Hastings Technologies. All of them involved in aggressive acquisition strategies. Keisha found news articles about the Kellerman takeover attempt. Hostile bid. Board pressure. Leaked proprietary information that had given Kellerman the advantage they needed. The articles mentioned that someone inside Hastings Technologies had to be feeding information to competitors. Someone like a COO who had access to everything. Someone like Brandon Cole. But why? Brandon had everything here. Position, wealth, family. Why destroy the man who'd given him all of it? Keisha kept searching, going back further. Brandon Cole at MIT, scholarship student. Before that, public records showed his father, Robert Cole, had been convicted of embezzlement 15 years ago. He'd worked as an accountant for Hastings Technologies when Trevor's father still ran the company. Robert Cole had stolen $2 million over 3 years before getting caught. He'd gone to prison. His wife had filed for divorce and disappeared. Their son Brandon had been 17, suddenly alone. Trevor's father had pressed charges despite knowing it would destroy the Cole family. Business was business. Theft was theft. No mercy. But then Trevor had met Brandon at MIT the following year. Had taken him home for holidays. Had convinced Dorothy to treat him like family. Had given him everything back. Or so it seemed. Keisha found more articles. Robert Cole had died in prison 7 years ago. Lung cancer, inadequate medical care. The articles mentioned he'd maintained his innocence, claimed he'd been framed by higher-ups in the company. No one had believed him. What if he'd been telling the truth? What if Brandon knew something no one else did? What if 15 years of playing devoted son had been about revenge all along? Keisha's phone battery dropped to 15%. She plugged it in and kept searching. She found Vanessa Cole's social media, years of posts. Recent ones showed her at corporate events, schmoozing with Kellerman executives. Older ones showed her and Brandon together, siblings who'd survived their parents' destruction. One post from 3 years ago stopped Keisha cold. A photo of Vanessa and Brandon at their father's grave. The caption read, "We promised you we'd make them pay. We're almost there. Rest easy, Dad. Make them pay." The Hastings family. Trevor and his father's legacy. Brandon had been planning this for years. Worming his way into the family. Making Dorothy love him. Positioning himself as irreplaceable. All while preparing to destroy everything from the inside. And Dorothy, sweet Dorothy who treated everyone like family, had given him exactly what he needed. Access. Trust. Love. Keisha had to tell someone. But who? Trevor wouldn't believe her. He'd dismiss it as paranoid accusations from new staff. Raymond might listen, but he'd need proof beyond Google searches and conspiracy theories. Mrs. Howell would fire her on the spot. That left Dorothy. But breaking Dorothy's heart with this truth felt cruel. The woman had already lost so much. Her husband dead 5 years now. Her daughter, Trevor's younger sister, had died in childhood from leukemia. Dorothy had poured her grief into loving Trevor and Brandon, the 2 sons who remained. Telling her that one of those sons wanted to destroy the other would shatter her. But not telling her might get her hurt worse. Keisha set her phone aside and tried to sleep. Failed. At 3 a.m., she gave up and dressed quietly. The house was silent, dark except for security lights. She moved through hallways she'd cleaned a dozen times, heading toward the library where she could think. A light glowed under the library door. Keisha froze. Someone else couldn't sleep either. She pushed the door open carefully. Dorothy sat in an armchair by the window, wrapped in a thick robe, watching snow fall through darkness. She turned when the door opened, her face shifting from startled to relieved when she saw Keisha. "Can't sleep either?" Dorothy signed. Keisha shook her head and entered, closing the door behind her. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 insomniacs seeking refuge from thoughts that wouldn't quiet. "I dream about my daughter sometimes," Dorothy signed suddenly. "Emily. She died when she was 7. Leukemia. Trevor was 9. He barely remembers her now, but I remember everything." "I'm sorry," Keisha signed. "After Emily died, my husband buried himself in work. Trevor did the same, even as a child. Always achieving, always building, never stopping long enough to feel anything." Dorothy's hands moved slowly, heavy with old grief. "When Trevor brought Brandon home from college, I saw another boy who needed a mother. Someone I could love without the fear of losing them to illness. Silly, right? As if loving Brandon meant Emily's death hurt less. Love isn't silly. It's what keeps us alive. Brandon needed us so much. His father in prison, his mother gone. He was so angry at first, so hurt. But slowly he softened. He let me in. Let me mother him. And I thought I'd saved him." Dorothy's smile was sad. "Maybe I only gave him a different kind of pain." "What do you mean?" Dorothy's hands hesitated. "Sometimes I see the way Brandon looks at Trevor. The way he watches everything Trevor has. And I wonder if I made a mistake. If bringing him into our family only showed him everything he'd lost. Everything that should have been his if his father hadn't gone to prison." "Do you think Brandon resents Trevor?" "I think Brandon loves me genuinely. But I also think he's angry at a world that gave Trevor everything and gave him nothing." Dorothy met Keisha's eyes. A mother knows. Even when she doesn't want to see it. Even when acknowledging it means admitting she failed to heal the wound. Keisha's throat tightened. Dorothy already suspected. Some part of her already knew. "Can I tell you about my brother?" Keisha signed. His name was Marcus. For the next hour, they shared their grief. Keisha signed about Marcus's death, about the paramedics who couldn't understand him, about 6 years of guilt and silence. Dorothy signed about Emily's slow deterioration, about watching her daughter disappear by degrees, about the emptiness that never quite filled. 2 women, 2 dead children, 2 kinds of loss that never stopped hurting. I learned ASL for Marcus, Keisha signed. But using it hurt too much, so I stopped. Until I met you. You reminded me why language matters. Why being seen matters. And you reminded me that I've been invisible too long. Dorothy reached across and took Keisha's hand. Trevor loves me, but he doesn't see me. Brandon sees me, but I'm not sure he loves the real me. Just the mother he needed me to be. What if I told you I think Brandon is dangerous? That I think he's planning something that could hurt Trevor and you? Dorothy's face didn't show surprise. Just exhaustion. What if I told you I've suspected for months but couldn't bear to face it? That admitting Brandon might betray us means admitting I failed another child. You didn't fail anyone. Brandon made his choices. Did he? Or did we make them for him by putting him in a family that could never really be his? Dorothy pulled her hand back, signing with shaking fingers. I found something 2 months ago. Papers in Brandon's coat pocket when I was hanging it up after dinner. Financial documents about Kellerman Industries. He explained it away, said Trevor had asked him to research the competition. But Trevor never mentioned it when I asked him later. Why didn't you tell Trevor then? Because I was afraid. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of destroying our family over suspicion. Afraid that if I was right, it would mean everything with Brandon was a lie. Dorothy's signs grew sharp, angry. Do you know what it's like to lose a child, Keisha? To have that hole in your heart that never heals? Brandon filled some of that hole. Losing him would be losing Emily all over again. But if he's planning to hurt Trevor, then I have to choose between my sons. Real and chosen. Blood and heart. Dorothy stood, moved to the window, her reflection ghostly in the dark glass. Trevor is my son. I would die for him. But Brandon is also my son, in every way that matters except biology. How do I choose? Keisha joined her at the window. Outside, snow had stopped falling. The world lay buried and silent, waiting for dawn to reveal the damage. You don't choose between them, Keisha signed. You choose truth. Whatever that truth is, whatever it costs, you face it. Because pretending helps no one. Not Trevor. Not Brandon. Not you. Even if the truth destroys us, lies destroy worse. At least truth gives you something solid to stand on while you rebuild. Dorothy studied Keisha's face for a long moment. Then she signed something that made Keisha's heart break. You're brave. Braver than me. You came into this house and saw what I've been too afraid to admit for months. I don't know what Brandon is planning, but I know you're right to be worried. I've felt it too. That wrongness underneath his smile. Then help me figure out what he's doing before it's too late. How? Tell me everything. Every conversation with Brandon that felt off. Every time he asked about Trevor's business. Every moment you felt like he was performing instead of being real. They sat together as dawn approached, Dorothy signing stories that painted a picture Keisha had only glimpsed. Brandon asking detailed questions about Trevor's patents. Brandon steering Dorothy away from visiting the office. Brandon always present when Trevor discussed business at home. Brandon with a key to every room, access to every file, trust that opened every door. He gave me this last Christmas, Dorothy signed, touching a delicate bracelet on her wrist. Silver with tiny charms. He said it reminded him of my daughter. That Emily would have loved it. May I see it? Dorothy unclasped it and handed it over. Keisha examined the bracelet in the growing light. The charms were beautiful. A tiny book. A flower. A heart. And something else. A small cylinder barely bigger than a grain of rice, disguised as a decorative bead. Keisha's blood went cold. She'd seen devices like this before in news articles about corporate espionage. Tracking devices small enough to hide in jewelry. Some included microphones. Some transmitted location data. Brandon hadn't given Dorothy a gift. He'd given her a leash. What is it? Dorothy signed, reading Keisha's expression. Keisha showed her the tiny device. Explained what it might be. Watched Dorothy's face crumble as understanding hit. He's been tracking me, Dorothy signed, her hands shaking now. All this time. Every place I go. Everyone I meet. He's been watching me like I'm something to control. I think he's planning to use you against Trevor. To force his hand somehow. Your safety, your location, everything about you has been information he's been gathering. Dorothy sank back into the chair, her whole body collapsing inward. I loved him. I truly loved him like my own child. I know. And he was using me the whole time. Maybe not the whole time. Maybe his love was real at first. Maybe it's complicated. Keisha didn't know if that was true, but the raw pain on Dorothy's face needed something softer than harsh truth. What do we do now? Now we stop him. But carefully. If Brandon realizes we know, he might accelerate whatever he's planning. Keisha's mind raced through options. We need proof. Real evidence that ties him to Kellerman Industries. And we need Trevor to believe us, which means we need something undeniable. How do we get that? We make Brandon think he's still in control. You keep wearing the bracelet. You keep treating him like you always have. And I keep cleaning and watching and being invisible while I find what we need. That's dangerous. If he suspects you're investigating him. I've survived worse than rich men's anger, Keisha signed. And I won't let him hurt you or Trevor. You showed me kindness when everyone else saw furniture. You treated me like family. That means something. Dorothy stood and pulled Keisha into a fierce hug. No signs, no words. Just the desperate grip of someone who'd found an unexpected ally in the darkest moment. When they separated, dawn was breaking through the windows. Pink and orange light on endless white snow. The storm had passed. Soon the house would wake. Trevor would emerge for coffee. Brandon would appear with his perfect smile. Mrs. Howell would start breakfast. And Dorothy and Keisha would pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The truth was out now. Spoken in signs only they understood. Brandon Cole was the enemy. The beloved son was the weapon aimed at Trevor's heart. And two women he'd underestimated held the only defense that mattered. Each other. The morning after the storm brought blinding sunshine on fresh snow. Trevor stood at the breakfast table, looking more rested than he had in weeks. The forced break from constant crisis had given him something he rarely allowed himself. Time with his mother. I was thinking, Trevor said, his voice lighter than usual. Mom, you've been asking me to learn more ASL for years. How about today we actually do it? No phones. No meetings. Just you teaching me properly. Dorothy's face transformed with joy. She signed her response, quick and eager. She says yes, absolutely, right now before you change your mind, Brandon translated from his seat across the table. He wore a navy sweater that made his blue eyes brighter, his expression warm and encouraging. I'll join too. We can make it a family lesson. Perfect. Trevor turned to Keisha, who was refilling coffee cups. Keisha, Mom tells me you're fluent. Would you help facilitate? Make sure we're actually getting it right. Every eye in the room turned to her. Mrs. Howell's gaze carried warning. Raymond's held curiosity. Brandon's face stayed pleasant, but something cold flickered beneath the surface. Of course, Mr. Hastings. I'd be happy to help, Keisha said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. They gathered in the main sitting room after breakfast. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, making the fresh snow outside almost painful to look at. Dorothy settled on the sofa between her two sons, her happiness visible in every gesture. Trevor sat on her right, notebook ready like he was preparing for a business meeting. Brandon lounged on her left, relaxed and confident. Keisha positioned herself across from them, close enough to demonstrate but far enough to observe. The tracking bracelet still circled Dorothy's wrist. They'd agreed last night to leave it in place, to let Brandon think his surveillance continued unnoticed. Start with basics, Dorothy signed to Keisha. The alphabet, numbers, common phrases. For the next 2 hours, they learned. Trevor struggled at first, his hands stiff and uncertain. He'd apologize every time he messed up, frustrated with himself. Dorothy would gently correct him, her patience infinite. She'd show him the sign again, let him practice, encourage his progress. Brandon, meanwhile, signed with fluid ease. He knew more than Keisha had expected. Complex sentences, emotional nuances, cultural context. He'd learned deeply, thoroughly, which made sense if he'd been planning this for years. To get close to Dorothy, he'd needed her language. When did you learn all this? Trevor asked, watching Brandon sign a complicated sentence about childhood memories. Over the past few years. Online courses, deaf community events, practice. Brandon shrugged. Dorothy deserves someone who can really talk to her. Not just basic signs, but real conversation. The guilt on Trevor's face was sharp and immediate. I should have done this years ago. You're doing it now, Dorothy signed, her hands gentle. That's what matters. But Keisha saw the damage. Brandon's comment had landed exactly as intended. Trevor felt like a failure. Brandon looked like the devoted son who'd put in the work. The wedge drove deeper. They broke for lunch, then continued. Dorothy taught them signs for emotions. Happy, sad, angry, afraid, love. Trevor practiced each one carefully, his earlier frustration giving way to genuine engagement. He signed I love you to his mother with such raw sincerity that Dorothy teared up. I should tell you that more, Trevor signed clumsily. Not just say the words. Sign them. In your language. Dorothy pulled him into a hug, holding him like she had when he was small. Over Trevor's shoulder, she met Keisha's gaze. In that look was everything they'd shared last night. The grief, the fear, the determination to protect this love from the threat sitting 3 feet away. Brandon watched the embrace with an expression Keisha couldn't fully read. Jealousy, definitely, but also something softer, something that might have been genuine pain. Family moment, Brandon said lightly, standing. I'll give you two some space. Need to check my emails anyway. After he left, Trevor pulled back from his mother and signed something private. Dorothy's hands moved in response, tender and reassuring. Keisha looked away, giving them privacy. This was why she'd come back every day despite the threats. These moments of real connection. This was worth protecting. Trevor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then signed to Dorothy. 5 minutes. Just one call. I promise. Go, Dorothy signed back. I know you're busy. I'm proud of you. Trevor kissed her forehead and disappeared into his study. Dorothy's shoulders sagged the moment he left. The performance of happiness took energy she was running out of. Are you okay? Keisha signed. I'm tired of pretending Brandon is who I thought he was, Dorothy signed back. All morning, watching him smile and laugh and sign with us, knowing he's been tracking me like an animal. It makes my skin crawl. I know. But we need more evidence before we confront him. Once Trevor sees proof he can't deny, we'll end this. What if we're wrong? What if Brandon really does love us and the bracelet is something innocent? Do you believe that? Dorothy's hands fell still for a long moment. Then she signed slowly, heavily. No. I stopped believing it last night. I think I've known for months that something was wrong. I just didn't want to face it. They sat together in the afternoon light, two women carrying a secret that would break the family they were trying to save. Outside, neighborhood kids had emerged to play in the snow. Their laughter drifted through the windows, bright and innocent. Inside, Keisha and Dorothy prepared for war. Brandon returned an hour later with something in his hands. A photo album, old and worn. Found this in the library. Thought we could look through it together. Dorothy's face lit up. She patted the sofa beside her. Brandon sat and opened the album. Pages of memories. Trevor as a baby. Dorothy and her late husband at their wedding. And near the middle, A little girl with Dorothy's eyes and Trevor's smile. Emily, Dorothy signed, touching the photo with gentle fingers. She was beautiful, Brandon signed. You must miss her every day. Every day, Dorothy confirmed. Some losses never stop hurting. They turned pages together. Emily at 4, covered in paint from an art project. Emily at 6, missing her front teeth. Emily at 7, thin and pale in a hospital bed, but smiling. Trevor doesn't talk about her much, Brandon signed. I think it hurts him too much. He was 9 when she died. Too young to process that kind of loss. He buried it and never looked back. Dorothy's signs carried old sadness. Sometimes I wonder if that's why he can't stop working. If staying busy means never feeling the empty space she left. You never buried it though, Brandon signed. You felt everything. Someone had to remember her fully. Someone had to keep her alive in more than photographs. Brandon's hands moved carefully, forming signs that looked sincere. You're the strongest person I know. You lost your daughter, your husband, and you still love so openly. Still treat people like family even when they don't deserve it. Everyone deserves love, Dorothy signed. Even me. Brandon's question hung in the air, vulnerable and raw. Even the charity case you took in because you felt sorry for him? Dorothy set down the album and took both of Brandon's hands. You were never charity. You were a gift. A second chance at having 2 children after losing one. I love you, Brandon. I always will. Keisha watched from her position near the doorway, pretending to dust shelves but really observing. Brandon's face as Dorothy spoke those words showed genuine emotion. Tears gathered in his eyes. His hands trembled slightly in Dorothy's grip. I love you too, Brandon signed. You gave me everything when I had nothing. A home. A family. A reason to keep going after my father died. Your father's death wasn't your fault. What happened to your family wasn't your fault. Trevor's father destroyed us. Brandon's signs turned sharp, angry. He prosecuted my dad without mercy. Didn't care that it would leave me alone. Just cared about protecting his company. I know. And I'm sorry. If I could change what my husband did, I would. Would Trevor? Would he show mercy if someone stole from his company? Brandon pulled his hands away, signing with controlled fury. Or would he do exactly what his father did? Destroy them completely. Dorothy's face paled. Trevor isn't his father. Isn't he? Look at how he fights this merger. No compromise. No mercy. Exactly like his father. Brandon stood, pacing to the window. Sometimes I wonder if taking me in was guilt. If you and Trevor keep me close because you know what your family did to mine. We keep you close because we love you. Or because I'm convenient. The COO who knows all the secrets. The friend who can be controlled with affection. Brandon turned back, his expression hard now. Do you know what it's like? Living in the house that should have been mine if my father hadn't been destroyed? Watching Trevor inherit everything while I get the scraps. Brandon, that's not fair. Trevor gave you everything. Trevor gave me nothing. You gave me love. Trevor gave me a job and expected gratitude. Brandon's signs were harsh, cutting. I've spent 15 years proving myself. 15 years being the good son, the loyal friend, the one who can be trusted. And for what? So Trevor can take all the credit while I do all the work. Keisha's hands itched to intervene, but she stayed frozen. This was it. The mask slipping. The real Brandon emerging. Dorothy stood, signing with shaking hands. If you're unhappy here, if you feel unappreciated, then talk to Trevor. Tell him what you need. What I need is what should have been mine from the beginning. Brandon's face shifted, emotions warring. Then suddenly he crumpled, dropping to his knees in front of Dorothy. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I'm just tired. The stress of the merger, watching Trevor struggle, wanting to help but feeling useless. He pressed his face against Dorothy's hands, his shoulders shaking. Real tears or performance? Keisha couldn't tell anymore. Maybe Brandon couldn't either. Maybe he'd played devoted son so long he didn't know where the act ended and reality began. Dorothy stroked his hair, her expression torn between love and fear. She'd seen behind the mask. She couldn't unsee it now. But maternal instinct was powerful. Even knowing the danger, she couldn't stop comforting him. "It's okay," Dorothy signed when Brandon looked up. "We all say things we don't mean when we're exhausted. I know you love Trevor. I know you'd never hurt him." "Never," Brandon signed, his face a picture of sincerity. "He's my brother. You're my mother. This family is everything to me." But Keisha saw what Dorothy was too close to see. The calculation behind Brandon's tears. The way he'd revealed just enough anger to seem human while hiding the real depths of his rage. He was testing Dorothy, seeing how much truth she could handle before she broke. Trevor returned from his call, taking in the scene. Brandon on his knees, Dorothy comforting him, both of them emotional. "What happened? What's wrong?" "Nothing," Brandon said aloud, standing and wiping his eyes. "Just got overwhelmed looking at old photos. Missing my own family." Trevor's face softened. He crossed the room and pulled Brandon into a hug. "You have family. Us. Always us." Brandon returned the embrace, but over Trevor's shoulder, his eyes found Keisha. The look he gave her was clear. A warning. A promise. He knew she'd seen the mask slip. He knew she was dangerous now. And he was letting her know that he was dangerous too. The rest of the afternoon passed in false peace. They had dinner together, all of them playing their parts. Trevor talking about the company with guarded optimism. Brandon being supportive and engaged. Dorothy smiling while her heart broke. Mrs. Howell serving perfect food. Raymond checking security. Keisha refilling drinks and watching everything. A family dinner. Warm and normal on the surface. Rotten underneath. After dinner, Trevor taught Dorothy how to play chess. Brandon helped, explaining strategies, making her laugh with terrible puns signed with exaggerated expressions. For hours, they were just three people who loved each other, enjoying a snow day together. Keisha cleaned the dining room and tried not to think about how much it would hurt when this family shattered. Because it would shatter. Brandon's confession today, even partial, meant the break was coming. He was tired of pretending. Tired of being the grateful charity case. Tired of watching Trevor have everything. Soon he'd make his move. Use Dorothy somehow. Force Trevor's hand. And when he did, Keisha and Dorothy would have to be ready. Ready to break Brandon's heart before he broke theirs. Ready to choose Trevor over the son Dorothy had loved for 15 years. Ready to destroy the family to save it. The chess game ended with Dorothy victorious. Trevor laughed and signed his congratulations. Brandon signed that she'd always been the smartest one in the family. Dorothy glowed with joy, soaking up the attention and love like someone who'd been starving for it. Keisha watched from the doorway and wondered how much of this warmth would survive the truth. How much love could withstand betrayal this deep? How much would be left when the masks finally came off completely? She'd find out soon enough. They all would. Trevor's phone woke the entire house. Not a normal ring, but the emergency tone reserved for catastrophic news. Keisha heard it from the staff bedroom, heard Trevor's footsteps pounding down the hall, heard his voice rising in disbelief. By the time she dressed and reached the main floor, chaos had erupted. Trevor stood in his study, still in pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt, staring at his laptop screen like it had grown teeth. Raymond hovered behind him, his expression grim. Brandon appeared in the doorway, hair mussed, looking genuinely confused. "What happened?" Brandon asked. Trevor's voice came out strangled. "Someone leaked the Titan protocol to Kellerman Industries. All of it. 3 years of proprietary code. Gone. That's impossible. The servers are encrypted. Access is limited to maybe 5 people. 6 people." Trevor's hands shook as he gripped the desk. "You, me, Patterson, Lou, Morrison, and Dad's old files that I kept in the vault downstairs." "When did the leak happen?" "Last night." sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. Someone accessed the main server from inside this house using my credentials. The air in the room went cold. Brandon stepped inside, his face paling. From inside the house? Trevor, that's insane. Who would? I don't know. Trevor turned to Raymond. Pull the security footage. Every camera. Every entrance. Someone in this house just destroyed my company. Raymond nodded and left. Trevor sank into his chair, pressing his palms against his eyes. Brandon moved closer, putting a hand on Trevor's shoulder. We'll figure this out. We'll find who did this and we'll fix it. There's no fixing this. Kellerman now has everything they need to replicate Titan. The board will vote for the takeover on Friday. It's over. Keisha watched from the hallway, her mind racing. Last night between midnight and 3 a.m. She'd been asleep in the staff bedroom. Dorothy had been in the blue guest room. Mrs. Howell in her quarters. Raymond doing security rounds. Brandon in the guest suite on the second floor. And Trevor's study was directly below that guest suite. Mrs. Howell appeared, wrapping a thick robe around herself. What's all this noise about? Corporate espionage, Brandon said quietly. Someone stole proprietary information from Trevor's servers last night. From inside the house? That's absurd. The staff are all vetted and loyal. Keisha's stomach dropped. Mrs. Howell's gaze swung to her immediately, suspicious and accusing. The new girl arrived right when the takeover bids started getting aggressive, Mrs. Howell said slowly. Convenient timing. Keisha has no access to my study, Trevor said, but his voice carried doubt. She's never been in there. That you know of. Mrs. Howell crossed her arms. I've been warning you about her from the beginning. Too educated for a maid. Too interested in family matters. And now this. I didn't do anything. Keisha's voice came out strong despite her terror. I was asleep in the staff room all night. Can anyone verify that? Mrs. Howell pressed. No. No one could. Keisha had been alone from 10 p.m. until she woke at 6:30. 7.5 hours of no alibi. Dorothy appeared at the top of the stairs, signing frantically. What's happening? Why is everyone yelling? Trevor looked up at his mother, his face haggard. Someone stole from the company, Mom. From inside our house. Dorothy descended slowly, her face confused and frightened. Brandon moved to help her down the last few steps, ever attentive. She signed to him, asking for details. He explained in sign language, his hands fluid and clear. This is my fault, Trevor said suddenly. I should have kept the servers off-site. I should have been more careful. But I trusted everyone in this house. I thought we were safe here. You are safe here, Brandon said firmly. Whoever did this, we'll find them. Raymond's pulling footage now. We'll have answers soon. They gathered in the sitting room to wait. Tense, silent, everyone eyeing each other with new suspicion. Keisha sat apart from the others, feeling the weight of accusation. Mrs. Howell watched her like a hawk. Trevor kept glancing at her, doubt written across his features. Only Dorothy seemed certain of Keisha's innocence. She sat beside her on the sofa, close enough to offer silent support. Brandon noticed this and his jaw tightened. Raymond returned 30 minutes later with a tablet. I've got the footage from last night. You need to see this. They crowded around as Raymond played the video. Timestamp showed 1:47 a.m. The camera covering the study hallway showed a figure entering. But the angle was bad, the lighting worse. The person wore dark clothes and moved quickly, their face obscured. Can you enhance it? Trevor asked. Already did. Best I can get is height and build. Around 5'10", slender build, moves with confidence. Raymond scrolled through more footage. They were in the study for 18 minutes. Left at 2:05 a.m. After that, the trail goes cold. No other cameras picked them up. Someone who knows the security system, Brandon said. Someone who knows where the blind spots are. All eyes turned to Keisha again. She was 5'6", but in the right shoes and clothes, Maybe she could pass for taller. The build was close enough. "It wasn't me," Keisha said, her voice harder now. "I don't know anything about your security system. I've been here less than a week." "Long enough to learn the layout," Mrs. Howell countered. "Long enough to gain trust by signing with Mrs. Hastings. Long enough to position yourself exactly where you needed to be." "Why would I risk everything to steal information I wouldn't know what to do with?" "Money. Kellerman Industries would pay handsomely for this kind of information." Trevor stood, pacing. "Raymond, I need you to search Keisha's room and her belongings. Check her phone, her computer, everything." "Trevor, you can't seriously think she's capable of this," Brandon said, but his tone carried something else. Not defense. More like he was reading lines from a script. "I don't know what to think anymore." Trevor turned to Keisha, his hazel eyes hard. "If you're innocent, you have nothing to hide." Raymond left to search the staff bedroom. Keisha sat frozen, knowing what he'd find. Nothing. Because she hadn't done it. But proving a negative was impossible. How do you prove you didn't do something when all the evidence pointed to you? Dorothy signed something sharp and angry. Brandon translated, his voice neutral. "She says you're all being ridiculous. Keisha wouldn't do this. She's been nothing but kind and helpful. Mom, I appreciate your faith in her, but we can't let emotions cloud judgment." Trevor's voice cracked on the last word. "My company is being destroyed. Someone in this house betrayed me. I have to follow the evidence." "Then follow it all the way," Dorothy signed, her hands fierce. "Don't just look at the convenient target. Look at everyone." "What's that supposed to mean?" Trevor signed back clumsily. Dorothy's hands moved so fast Keisha almost missed it. "It means whoever did this knew your security system perfectly. Knew your passwords. Knew exactly when to strike. That's not some maid who's been here 5 days. That's someone who's been here for years." Brandon's expression flickered. Just for a second. But Keisha saw it. Fear. Calculation. Adjustment. "Dorothy's right," Brandon said. "We should check all access logs. See who's been in the study recently. I'm in there all the time for work. My fingerprints are everywhere. But there should be digital records of who accessed what and when." "I'll pull the server logs," Trevor said, moving to his laptop. Raymond returned, shaking his head. "Keisha's room is clean. No electronics except her phone, which is a basic model with no suspicious apps or contacts. No hidden documents. No evidence of anything." "She could have disposed of it," Mrs. Howell insisted. "When? The house has been snowed in. No one's left. Where would she hide evidence?" The question hung unanswered. Trevor stared at his screen, scrolling through access logs. His face went progressively paler. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "The logs show my credentials were used, but I was asleep. Someone cloned my access somehow. Who has the technical skill to do that?" Raymond asked. Trevor looked up slowly. His gaze moved around the room, landing on each person. Mrs. Howell, who'd worked here 15 years and could barely use email. Raymond, whose expertise was physical security, not digital. Keisha, who'd been here less than a week and had no demonstrated technical knowledge. Brandon, who'd been COO for 5 years and knew every system intimately. "No," Trevor whispered. "No, that's impossible." "What?" Brandon asked, his voice steady. "The access cloning. It's sophisticated. It requires deep knowledge of our security architecture. Knowledge that only a handful of people have." "Trevor, what are you saying?" "I'm saying the list of people who could pull this off is very short." Trevor's hands shook as he set down his laptop. "And you're on it." The room went silent. Brandon's face remained calm, but something predatory entered his eyes. "You think I did this? After everything we've been through? After 15 years of friendship?" Brandon's voice carried hurt, betrayal, disbelief. "Trevor, I'm your brother. Then help me understand. The logs show the access came from the second floor. From the guest suite where you're staying. Anyone could have accessed that room. The door doesn't lock from the outside. But you were there. You had opportunity, access, knowledge. Trevor stood, moving closer to Brandon. And your sister works for Kellerman Industries. I just found that out this morning when I was researching their team. Vanessa Cole, head of marketing. Your sister. Brandon's mask finally cracked. The pleasant expression slipped, replaced by something colder. Harder. So what? My sister chose her own career path. That doesn't make me a traitor, doesn't it? She's been at 3 different companies that competed with us. Each time they had inside information. Each time we lost ground. Trevor's voice rose. How long have you been planning this? How long have you been using me? I've been protecting you, Brandon shot back. Keeping your company afloat while you played billionaire genius. Everything you have, I helped build. And how do you repay me? By accusing me of betrayal the second something goes wrong. Because you did betray me. Trevor's face flushed red. My father destroyed yours, so you spent 15 years getting close to my family just to destroy me the same way. That's what this is about, isn't it? Revenge. Your father destroyed my entire family over money he could have written off as a business loss. Brandon's voice went deadly quiet. He prosecuted my dad knowing it would send him to prison. Knowing my mother would leave. Knowing I'd end up alone. Your father valued his company more than human lives. And you're exactly the same. My father was protecting what he built. My father was innocent. Brandon's hands clenched into fists. He was framed by someone higher up in the company, and your father didn't care. Didn't investigate. Just destroyed us and moved on. Well, guess what? I spent 15 years getting close enough to return the favor. And it worked. You trusted me completely. Gave me everything I needed. And now I'm taking it all back. Dorothy made a sound between a gasp and a sob. She signed something frantic. Brandon turned to her, his expression softening. I'm sorry, he signed. You were the only real thing in all of this. You loved me genuinely, and I love you too. But I can't let that stop me from finishing what I started. You used my mother, Trevor's voice broke. You made her love you just to get to me. I made her love me because she needed someone to love after losing Emily. I filled a hole in her heart. That wasn't manipulation. That was survival. Brandon moved toward the door. The information is already sent. Kellerman has everything they need. By Friday, they'll own your company. And there's nothing you can do about it. Raymond stepped forward, blocking the exit. You're not leaving. You going to stop me? Call the police. Brandon laughed. Go ahead. Prove I did anything illegal. The access came from Trevor's credentials. The logs show his laptop. My sister works for a competitor, but that's not a crime. You have suspicions, not evidence. The bracelet, Keisha said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. The one you gave Dorothy. It has a tracking device in it. Everyone turned to stare at her. Brandon's face went completely blank. Show them, Keisha signed to Dorothy. Show them what we found. Dorothy unclasped the bracelet with shaking hands and held it out. Trevor took it, examining the tiny cylinder disguised among the charms. His face went white. You've been tracking my mother? Listening to her conversations. Keeping her safe, Brandon corrected. Making sure no one tried to use her against you. Which ironically is exactly what I ended up doing. But I never hurt her. Never would. You're hurting her right now. Trevor's voice dropped to a whisper. She loved you like a son. And you were using her the whole time. Brandon looked at Dorothy, and for the first time, real emotion cracked through. Regret. Grief. Love twisted into something painful. I didn't use all of it. Some of it was real. You were real, Dorothy. The only mother I've had since mine left. Dorothy signed something. Brandon shook his head. I can't read that. I'm too upset. Keisha translated, her voice gentle despite everything. "She says you broke her heart. That's what she signed. You broke her heart, and she doesn't know if she can forgive you." Brandon's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the lost 17-year-old boy he'd been when Trevor first brought him home. Then the mask rebuilt itself, colder than before. "I'm leaving. Don't try to stop me." He looked at Trevor one last time. "You want to know the worst part? I really did love you like a brother. But I loved my real father more. And he died in prison because of yours. So yeah, I used you. I betrayed you. I destroyed you. And I'd do it again." He walked past Raymond, who let him go after a nod from Trevor. The front door opened and closed. Brandon Cole left the house that had been his home for 15 years. And the family he left behind stood in ruins. Trevor sank to the floor, his back against the wall, face in his hands. Dorothy collapsed onto the sofa, silent tears streaming down her face. Raymond stepped outside to make calls. Mrs. Howell retreated to the kitchen, muttering prayers. Keisha stood alone in the middle of the shattered remains of a family, knowing she'd helped break them. Even if it had been the right thing to do. Even if they'd needed to see the truth. The cost of truth was sometimes everything. And they just paid it in full. The house felt like a tomb. Trevor hadn't moved from his position on the study floor in over an hour. Dorothy sat on the sofa, staring at nothing, her hands still for the first time since Keisha had met her. Mrs. Howell had retreated entirely, leaving half-prepared breakfast abandoned in the kitchen. Raymond coordinated with lawyers and federal investigators from the security office, his voice a low rumble through the walls. Keisha stood at the window, watching plows clear the street outside. Life continuing as normal while everything inside this house burned to ash. Her phone buzzed. A text from her cousin Janelle. "You still alive in that rich people house, or did they work you to death?" Keisha almost laughed. If only it were that simple. She should leave. Pack her things and walk out while she still could. This wasn't her family. Wasn't her problem. She'd done what she could, exposed the truth, and now the pieces would fall where they fell. Going home meant safety. Meant distance from pain that wasn't hers to carry. But when she turned from the window, she saw Dorothy's face. The woman who'd treated her like family from day one. The woman who'd reminded her why connection mattered. The woman who was drowning in grief and had no one to pull her back to shore. Trevor had disappeared into himself. Mrs. Howell had judged and dismissed. Raymond had a job to do that didn't include emotional support. That left Keisha. The maid. The outsider. The one who shouldn't matter but somehow did. She crossed to Dorothy and sat beside her, not signing, not speaking. Just present. After several minutes, Dorothy's hand found hers and squeezed. The grip was desperate, drowning, holding on to anything solid. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Dorothy finally signed, her movements slow and heavy. "All the moments when something felt wrong but I explained it away because I wanted him to be good. I wanted the fantasy of having 2 sons. So I ignored reality. You loved him. That's not a crime. It feels like one now. Like I betrayed Trevor by loving Brandon so much. Like I chose the wrong son. You didn't choose. You loved both. Brandon's choices are his own. His betrayal is his own. You're not responsible for what he became." Dorothy's face crumpled. "But I enabled it. I gave him access to Trevor. I vouched for him constantly. I made Trevor trust him completely. If I hadn't been so desperate for another child, maybe Trevor would have been more careful. Or maybe Brandon would have found another way in. Predators are good at finding cracks. You didn't create the crack. You were just a mother trying to love." They sat together as morning bled into afternoon. Eventually Trevor emerged from the study, his face haggard but determined. He'd changed into jeans and a gray sweater, trying to look normal when nothing was normal anymore. "I called Julian," Trevor said, his voice hoarse. "He's coordinating with federal prosecutors. Brandon's actions constitute corporate espionage, fraud, and about 6 other charges. They'll arrest him by tonight." Dorothy signed something. Trevor shook his head. "I can't read that, Mom. I'm sorry. I should have learned better. I should have done a lot of things better. She asked if there's any way to fix this without destroying Brandon completely, Keisha translated quietly. He destroyed himself. Trevor's voice cracked. He spent 15 years planning my downfall. Used you to do it. I don't owe him mercy. But I do, Dorothy signed, tears streaming down her face. Because I'm his mother too, even if he doesn't want me anymore. And mothers don't stop loving their children just because they make terrible choices. Trevor stared at his mother, something breaking open in his expression. He betrayed us. He betrayed you. How can you still care about him? Because love isn't a switch I can turn off. Because somewhere under all that rage and planning, there's still the scared 17-year-old boy who needed a family. Dorothy's hands shook as she signed. I'm not saying forgive him. I'm not saying protect him from consequences. I'm saying we have a choice. We can destroy him completely out of revenge, or we can let justice take its course while remembering he's still human. He didn't remember we were human when he was using us. Then be better than him. Be better than what his father's destruction made him. Dorothy stood, moving to Trevor. Your father showed no mercy to Robert Cole. That lack of mercy created Brandon's rage. Don't repeat that cycle. Trevor pulled his mother into his arms, both of them crying now. 15 years of complicated family dynamics, of chosen brothers and lost sisters, of love and betrayal and grief all tangled together. Keisha gave them privacy and found Raymond in the security office, surrounded by monitors and coffee cups. The feds want to move fast, Raymond said without looking up. They're coordinating with Kellerman Industries now. Turns out Brandon's sister Vanessa had no idea her brother was feeding them stolen information. She thought it was legitimate competitive intelligence. When she found out the truth this morning, she called them herself and offered to cooperate fully. So she's not part of it. No. She's been trying to rebuild her family's reputation legitimately. Brandon went rogue without telling her. Now she's furious and heartbroken. Raymond finally looked at Keisha. You did good work. Saw what others missed. If you hadn't pushed, if you hadn't made Dorothy see the truth, Brandon might have succeeded completely. I didn't do it for credit. I did it because Dorothy deserved protection. Still, takes courage to speak up when everyone's telling you to shut up and stay in your place. Raymond's dark eyes held respect. Mrs. Howell owes you an apology. Trevor too. They assumed the worst because of who you are instead of looking at the evidence. People usually do. Keisha's voice carried old exhaustion. I'm used to it. Doesn't make it right. They sat in companionable silence, watching security feeds show nothing but empty snow-covered grounds. Brandon was gone. The threat had passed. But the damage remained. Around 3 p.m., Julian arrived with 2 federal agents. They took statements from everyone, asked detailed questions about Brandon's behavior, his access, his relationship with Dorothy. The questions were clinical, professional, turning trauma into data points for prosecution. When they asked Dorothy about the bracelet, about how Brandon had tracked her movements for months, she answered in sign language that Keisha translated. Her hands moved mechanically, drained of emotion. She'd cried herself dry. The agents left with promises to keep them updated. Julian stayed behind to discuss next steps with Trevor. Damage control for the company. Emergency board meetings. Potential buyout alternatives now that Kellerman's information was tainted by theft. Business continued. The world kept turning. Money and power found new configurations. But families, once broken, didn't rebuild so easily. That evening, Mrs. Howell prepared dinner that no one ate. They pushed food around plates in the dining room, the silence heavy and uncomfortable. Trevor kept starting to say something, then stopping. Dorothy signed occasional comments that no one had the energy to respond to. Raymond ate efficiently, his attention still half on security concerns. After dinner, Trevor finally spoke what everyone was thinking. The board meeting is Friday. 2 days from now. Julian thinks we can survive this, but it'll be close. Some board members are spooked by the betrayal. They think if my COO could fool me for 15 years, maybe I'm not fit to lead. Are they wrong? The question came from Dorothy's signing hands, translated by Keisha. Not about your fitness to lead, but about being fooled. We were all fooled. Not just you. I should have seen it. I should have protected us better. How? By trusting no one. By treating everyone like potential enemies. Dorothy's signs were fierce now, angry. Brandon's betrayal is his sin, not yours. Don't let him take your ability to trust people. That's letting him win twice. Trevor looked at his mother with something like wonder. How are you so strong? He hurt you worst of all. Because I've survived worse. I lost my daughter. I lost my husband. I lived through grief that felt like dying. This hurts, but it won't kill me. Dorothy's hands moved with renewed energy. And neither will it kill you. We're Hastings. We survive. We rebuild. We trust again even when it's terrifying. I don't know if I can. Then learn. Start small. Dorothy turned to Keisha. This woman warned us. Risked her job, her safety, her comfort to protect us. And we thanked her by suspecting her of the very crime she was trying to prevent. That's where you start. By trusting the people who prove themselves worthy. Trevor's gaze moved to Keisha. Real shame crossed his face. I'm sorry. This morning, I assumed the worst. I let fear override logic. You've been nothing but helpful since you arrived, and I repaid that by treating you like a criminal. I understand why you did it. The situation was frightening. People make mistakes when they're scared. That's generous. More generous than I deserve. Trevor stood, moving closer. I want to make this right. Whatever you need. A raise, a promotion, a new position entirely. Name it. Keisha thought about that offer. More money would help. A better position would open doors. But what she really needed was simpler and harder to quantify. I need you to see me, she said quietly. Not as the help. Not as the black woman you're being generous to. But as a person who exists in her own right. Who has value beyond what she can do for you. The words hung in the air. Trevor absorbed them, really hearing them maybe for the first time. You're right. I've been looking through you instead of at you. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just do better. I will. We all will. Trevor returned to his seat. Starting now. You're not staff anymore. You're family. If you'll stay. If you'll help us figure out how to be a family again after this. Dorothy signed her agreement enthusiastically. Even Raymond nodded. Mrs. Howell, standing in the doorway, looked uncomfortable but didn't object. Keisha felt something warm unfold in her chest. Belonging. Acceptance. The thing she'd stopped believing she could find in places like this. I'll stay, she said. But on one condition. You all actually learn ASL properly. All of you. Dorothy shouldn't have to rely on me to communicate with her own family. Deal. Trevor's smile was small but genuine. Starting tomorrow. Daily lessons. No excuses. They finished dinner with slightly less tension. Made plans for the next few days. Discussed how to handle media attention when the news broke about Brandon's arrest. Decided together instead of Trevor deciding alone. It felt like the beginning of something. Not healed yet. Not whole. But moving in the right direction. Later that night, Keisha found Dorothy in the library, looking at the photo album from yesterday. The one with Emily and young Trevor and all the memories of before. Are you okay? Keisha signed. No. But I will be. Dorothy closed the album gently. I keep thinking about what Brandon said. That loving me was real even if everything else was fake. Do you think that's possible? To genuinely love someone while destroying their family? I think people are complicated. I think Brandon probably did love you as much as he was capable of loving anyone. But his rage was bigger than his love. And when we let rage drive us, we destroy everything, including the people we care about. I hope he finds peace someday. After he pays for what he did. After justice runs its course. I hope he finds a way to let go of the rage and just be human again. That's a kind wish for someone who hurt you so deeply. Kindness is the only thing that breaks cycles of revenge. Your father hurt mine. So I hurt you. So you hurt my children. It never ends unless someone chooses to stop. Dorothy's hands moved with conviction. I'm choosing to stop. Brandon made his choices. I release him to face the consequences. But I won't let him turn me into someone who delights in destruction. That's not who I am. Keisha thought about Marcus. About 6 years of carrying guilt and grief. About how that weight had made her invisible, afraid to be seen because being seen meant being vulnerable to more loss. Dorothy had just given her permission to set it down. Not to forget Marcus. Not to stop missing him. But to stop letting his death define every choice she made. Thank you, Keisha signed. For seeing me. For treating me like family when I was just supposed to clean your house. For reminding me that love is worth the risk of pain. Thank you for protecting me when no one else did. For speaking up when silence would have been safer. For being brave when I was too afraid to face the truth. Dorothy pulled Keisha into a hug that felt like coming home. 2 women who'd lost brothers. 2 women who'd learned to survive grief. 2 women who'd found each other in the wreckage of someone else's revenge. Not the family either of them had started with, but family nonetheless. The morning arrived with crystal clarity, the kind of brilliant autumn day that made the previous storm feel like a distant memory. Keisha woke in the staff bedroom, but for the first time since arriving, she didn't feel like staff. She felt like someone who belonged. Her phone showed a missed call from Julian, Trevor's lawyer. She dressed quickly and found the house already awake. Raymond stood in the kitchen with Mrs. Howell, both nursing coffee and speaking in low tones. They stopped when Keisha entered. Federal agents arrested Brandon at 6 a.m. this morning, Raymond said without preamble. He was staying at a hotel in Cambridge. Didn't resist. Julian called to let us know. Keisha absorbed the information. It was done then. The betrayal had consequences. Justice was moving forward. How's Trevor? In his study with Dorothy. Julian's on his way over. The board meeting's been moved up to this afternoon. Emergency session. Mrs. Howell's face was drawn, exhausted. Mr. Hastings asked for you specifically. Said he needs you to translate for Mrs. Hastings during the meeting. The board meeting? But that's private corporate business. Not anymore. Trevor's making it a family matter. Dorothy has a right to understand what's happening to her son's company. And apparently you're the only one he trusts to translate accurately. Mrs. Howell's tone was softer than usual. Almost apologetic. I owe you an apology, Keisha. I judged you from the moment you arrived. Assumed the worst because of my own prejudices. You proved me wrong in every way. Thank you for saying that. It needed saying. Mrs. Howell poured a fresh cup of coffee and handed it to Keisha. You saved this family. The least I can do is treat you with the respect you've earned. Keisha found Trevor and Dorothy in the study, sitting close together on the leather sofa. They'd been signing to each other, Trevor's movements still clumsy but earnest. He looked up when Keisha entered, relief crossing his face. There you are. Did Raymond tell you about Brandon? Yes. Are you okay? Honestly? I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated. Part of me feels like I lost my brother all over again. Trevor ran his hands through his honey-brown hair, making it stand up in all directions. The board meeting is at 2 p.m. I need you there to translate for Mom. She wants to understand everything, and I need her there for support. Of course. Whatever you need. Dorothy signed something, her movements gentle. Trevor tried to follow, then looked to Keisha. She says she's proud of you, Keisha translated. That you're handling this with grace and strength. That your father would be proud too. Trevor's eyes went glassy. I hope so. Dad built this company from nothing. Protecting it from people who wanted to tear it down was his life's work. I can't let Brandon's betrayal be the thing that destroys his legacy. It won't be, Dorothy signed firmly. Because you're stronger than Brandon's rage. Because you have people who truly love you. Because you choose to build instead of destroy. Julian arrived an hour later with documents and strategy. They gathered in the dining room, spreading papers across the polished table. The situation was complex but not hopeless. Kellerman Industries was backing away from the hostile takeover now that their information was proven stolen. The board members who'd been ready to flip were reconsidering. But trust had been damaged. Trevor would have to fight to keep his position. The key is transparency, Julian explained, his sharp eyes moving between Trevor and Dorothy. You admit you were deceived. You acknowledge the security failures. But you also demonstrate that you've learned from this and implemented new protections. Show strength, not weakness. How do I show strength when I feel like I'm barely holding it together? By telling the truth. Julian's expression softened. The board doesn't need a perfect CEO. They need an honest one. Someone who can admit mistakes and grow from them. That's real leadership. They spent the next 3 hours preparing. Practicing Trevor's presentation. Anticipating questions. Building a narrative that was truthful without being self-destructive. Dorothy watched it all, occasionally signing suggestions that Keisha translated. Her business instincts were sharp, honed from years married to Trevor's father. She might not run companies, but she understood people and power. At 1:30, they dressed for battle. Trevor in a navy suit that made him look older, more authoritative. Dorothy in an elegant emerald dress that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Keisha in the nicest outfit she owned, a burgundy blouse and black slacks that Mrs. Howell had pressed without being asked. They drove to Hastings Technologies headquarters in downtown Boston, Raymond at the wheel. The building was modern glass and steel, reaching toward a cloudless October sky. Inside, everything gleamed with success and ambition. Employees watched them pass with curious, worried faces. News of Brandon's arrest had already leaked. The boardroom was on the top floor, with windows overlooking the Charles River. 12 board members sat around a massive table, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to hostile. Trevor took his seat at the head. Dorothy sat beside him, Keisha standing slightly behind to translate. Julian positioned himself near the door, ready to provide legal support if needed. Patterson, the oldest board member with silver hair and kind eyes, spoke first. Trevor, we're glad you're here. This has been a difficult situation for everyone. We want to hear your side. Trevor stood, his hands steady despite the tension. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know Brandon Cole's arrest has raised serious questions about my judgment and leadership. I'm here to address those questions honestly. For the next 40 minutes, Trevor laid it bare. His 15-year friendship with Brandon. The trust that had blinded him to warning signs. The security failures that had allowed the breach. His mother's exploitation. The investigation that had revealed the truth. He didn't minimize his mistakes. Didn't blame others. Just told the story with painful clarity. Dorothy watched him with fierce pride. Several board members softened as Trevor spoke. Others remained skeptical. Morrison, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s who'd always resented Trevor's inheritance of his father's position, spoke up. This is all very moving, but the fact remains that your COO spent years deceiving you. How do we trust your judgment going forward? You don't. Not blindly. Trevor's voice was firm. I'm not asking for blind trust anymore. I'm asking for the chance to earn it back through actions. I've already implemented new security protocols. I've hired an independent firm to audit all our systems. I've restructured access levels so no single person has the kind of power Brandon wielded. And I'm committing to radical transparency with this board going forward. That's all well and good, but Kellerman Industries still has our proprietary code, Morrison pressed. How do we recover from that? We don't recover. We evolve. Trevor pulled up a presentation on the large screen. I've spent the last 24 hours working with our development team. The Titan protocol that Brandon leaked is already outdated. We've been developing Titan 2.0 for the past 6 months. It's better, faster, more secure. Kellerman can have the old code. We're moving forward with technology they can't replicate. The board members leaned forward, interest replacing skepticism. Trevor walked them through the new developments, his passion for the work evident. This was his element. Not corporate politics or personal drama, but actual innovation. Solving problems through technology and creativity. Dorothy signed something. Keisha translated, her voice clear and strong. Mrs. Hastings wants to say something. All eyes turned to Dorothy. She stood gracefully, signing with deliberate slowness so Trevor could follow along. He translated haltingly, but accurately. My son made mistakes. So did I. We both trusted someone who used that trust as a weapon. But mistakes don't define us. How we respond to them does. Trevor could have hidden this scandal. Could have covered it up or blamed others. Instead, he's standing here being honest with you, even knowing it might cost him everything. That's the kind of leader you want. Not someone who never makes mistakes, but someone who owns them and does better. She paused, letting Trevor catch up with the translation. Then continued. I lost my daughter 23 years ago. I lost my husband 5 years ago. Yesterday, I lost someone I considered a second son. Grief has taught me that love always involves risk. Trevor loved Brandon like a brother. That love made him vulnerable. But I'd rather have a son who loves deeply and gets hurt than a son who protects himself by never trusting anyone. Don't punish him for having a heart. The room was silent when she finished. Several board members had tears in their eyes. Even Morrison looked moved, though she tried to hide it. Patterson stood and extended his hand to Trevor. You have my vote. Both to keep your position and to move forward with Titan 2.0. Your mother is right. Integrity matters more than perfection. One by one, other board members added their support. Morrison held out longest, but finally nodded. Fine. But I'm watching closely. No more surprises. No more surprises, Trevor agreed. You have my word. The meeting adjourned with Trevor still CEO, the company still intact, and a path forward that felt solid instead of desperate. They left the building as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the car, Dorothy signed to Trevor with flying hands. He laughed for the first time in days, the sound rusty but real. What did she say? Keisha asked. She said she's taking us all out to dinner to celebrate. Her treat. And we're not allowed to talk about business. Only family stuff. Trevor met Keisha's eyes in the rearview mirror. That includes you. Family dinner. No arguments. They went to a small Italian restaurant in the North End, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Dorothy ordered for everyone, pointing at menu items and signing her choices. The server, a young woman with bright pink hair, smiled and pulled out her phone to use a translation app. My girlfriend is deaf, the server explained. I'm learning ASL. It's beautiful to see a family using it together. Dorothy beamed. Trevor looked proud. And Keisha felt something settle in her chest. Belonging. The kind she'd stopped believing existed for someone like her in spaces like this. They ate pasta and shared stories. Dorothy signed about Trevor as a child, including an embarrassing tale about him getting stuck in a tree at age 8. Trevor retaliated with a story about Dorothy accidentally dyeing all his white clothes pink in the wash. They laughed until their sides hurt, releasing tension that had built for days. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront despite the October cold. Fairy lights strung between lampposts made the night feel magical. Dorothy linked arms with both Trevor and Keisha, pulling them close. I have an idea, Trevor said suddenly. Keisha, I know you were working on getting your degree before life got in the way. What if Hastings Technologies funded your education? Full scholarship. Any school you want. Any program. Keisha stopped walking. Trevor, that's too much. It's not enough. You saved my company, my relationship with my mother, possibly my life. Education is the least I can offer. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's an investment. Trevor's hazel eyes were serious. You're brilliant, observant, and brave. Those are exactly the qualities we need in leadership. Get your degree, then come work for us in a real capacity. Not as staff. As someone who helps shape the company's future. Dorothy signed her enthusiastic agreement. Even Raymond, walking a respectful distance behind them, nodded. Keisha felt tears threatening. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Dorothy signed. Say you'll stay with us. Say you'll be family for real. Yes, Keisha signed back, her hands shaking with emotion. Yes to all of it. They continued walking, for people who'd been strangers 2 weeks ago now bound together by crisis and choice. The city sparkled around them. Above, stars began appearing in the darkening sky. 3 months later, the leaves had fallen and winter had settled over Boston with serious intent. Keisha stood in the library at Dorothy's townhouse in Cambridge, surrounded by moving boxes. She'd officially moved out of her tiny apartment in Roxbury and into the guest suite at Dorothy's place. Close enough to help when needed, separate enough to have independence. Trevor had kept his promise. Keisha was enrolled at Boston University, studying business management with a minor in accessibility services. She worked part-time at Hastings Technologies in a newly created position focused on inclusive workplace practices. The job came with health insurance, retirement benefits, and respect. Brandon Cole's trial was scheduled for spring. Vanessa Cole had reached out to Dorothy through lawyers, asking for forgiveness and offering to testify against her brother. Dorothy had agreed to meet with her, demonstrating the grace that defined her. That meeting had led to an unlikely friendship. Vanessa now volunteered with Dorothy at a foundation they'd started together, teaching ASL to emergency responders. Marcus would have loved that. Keisha thought about him every time she taught a new class, imagining his joy. Trevor had started dating someone he'd met through the deaf community events he now attended regularly. A kind woman named Beth who challenged him to be better while accepting him as he was. Dorothy approved enthusiastically. Mrs. Howell had softened considerably, even taking ASL classes herself so she could communicate directly with Dorothy. Small miracles happened every day. On this particular December evening, they gathered for dinner at Dorothy's place. Trevor and Beth, Raymond and his wife, Mrs. Howell, Julian, and Keisha. Family, chosen and built from the ruins of betrayal. They sat around Dorothy's dining table, signing and speaking in a comfortable mix. Someone told a joke in ASL that required physical comedy to land. Everyone laughed. The room felt warm, full, right? Dorothy caught Keisha's eye across the table and signed something simple. Thank you. Keisha signed back. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For speaking up when silence was safer. For reminding us all what family really means. You did the same for me, Keisha signed. We saved each other. Dorothy smiled, that genuine warm expression that had first broken through Keisha's defenses. Around them, conversation flowed in multiple languages. Above them, Marcus and Emily existed in memory, their losses honored but no longer defining everything. Outside, snow began to fall. Soft, gentle, nothing like the storm that had trapped them together weeks ago. This snow was peaceful. A promise of rest after struggle. Of beauty after pain. Keisha looked around the table at faces that had become family. Not because of blood or obligation, but because of choice. Because they'd all decided that love was worth the risk. That trust, though terrifying after betrayal, was the only path forward. That being seen, truly seen, was the greatest gift humans could offer each other. She pulled out her phone and took a photo. Everyone signing various things. Laughing. Alive. She'd framed this one. Put it beside the photo of Marcus that she carried everywhere. Past and present, grief and joy, loss and love all existing together. Because that's what life was. Not one or the other, but everything at once. The mess and the magic. The breaking and the rebuilding. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found people who would rebuild with you. Who would sign your language even when it was hard. Who would see you even when invisibility felt safer. Keisha had found those people. In the last place she'd expected. In a house where she'd come to clean and stayed to become family. Dorothy raised her glass in a toast. Everyone followed, signing cheers in unison. The crystal caught candlelight and threw rainbows across the ceiling. Beautiful, broken light refracted into something new. Outside, snow covered the city. Inside, warmth and laughter and the steady knowledge that they'd survived the worst and chosen to love anyway. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Life has a funny way of bringing the right people together at exactly the right time, doesn't it? 6 months later, Keisha adjusted her coral blazer and took her seat in the courtroom gallery between Dorothy and Trevor. 6 months of healing, growing, and watching justice slowly grind forward. Today was sentencing day for Brandon Cole. The courtroom buzzed with quiet conversation. Journalists filled the back rows, their cameras ready for the moment Brandon appeared. Trevor sat rigid, his hand clasped tightly with Beth's. The woman beside him had warm brown skin, natural curls framing her face, and steady dark eyes that radiated calm. She was a sign language interpreter who'd met Trevor at one of Dorothy's foundation events in November. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on actual communication instead of convenience. Dorothy wore a lavender suit, her silver hair styled elegantly. She'd aged in the past 6 months, grief etching new lines around her eyes. But she'd also grown stronger. The foundation she'd started with Vanessa Cole had trained over 300 emergency responders in basic ASL. Marcus's death had been given purpose. Emily's memory had been honored through action instead of just sorrow. Vanessa Cole sat 2 rows behind them, alone. She'd lost her job at Kellerman Industries when the scandal broke, despite having no knowledge of her brother's crimes. The company had dissolved their hostile takeover attempt when federal investigators revealed that the stolen Titan protocol had been obtained through corporate espionage. Kellerman's CEO had resigned in disgrace. 3 board members faced their own legal troubles for not questioning the source of their suddenly perfect competitive intelligence. Vanessa had been devastated by her brother's betrayal. Not just of the Hastings family, but of her. She'd been rebuilding their family name legitimately, through hard work and ethics. Brandon had destroyed that with his revenge plot. But Dorothy, in a move that stunned everyone, had reached out to her, had invited her to coffee, had listened to her story. 2 women who'd both loved Brandon Cole and been betrayed by him had found unexpected solidarity. Now Vanessa served as the foundation's operations director, pouring her business expertise into something that helped people instead of destroying them. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Patricia Hendricks entered, a stern black woman in her 60s with a reputation for fair but firm sentencing. Everyone stood. Brandon was led in by federal marshals, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to diminish him. He'd lost weight. His sandy blonde hair had grown shaggy. But his blue eyes still held that calculating intelligence. Those eyes found Dorothy immediately. Something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe. Or just recognition that she'd come to witness his consequences. The proceedings moved with legal efficiency. The prosecution laid out the charges: corporate espionage, wire fraud, computer fraud, conspiracy, and illegal surveillance. Each charge carried years of potential prison time. Brandon had already pleaded guilty in February, his lawyers negotiating the best deal they could manage. The evidence had been overwhelming. The tracking bracelet Dorothy wore. The hidden camera in her bedroom that Raymond had eventually found and documented. The business card Keisha had photographed, which traced back to a burner phone Brandon used to coordinate with contacts at Kellerman Industries. The threatening text sent to Keisha the day she'd reported the camera to Raymond, sent from that same burner phone. Digital forensics had painted a damning picture of years of planning and months of active sabotage. Brandon's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, made a plea for leniency. Talked about Brandon's tragic childhood, his father's wrongful imprisonment, his mother's abandonment. Painted him as a victim of circumstances who'd made terrible choices born from trauma. Then it was the prosecution's turn to present victim impact statements. Trevor stood first. His voice shook as he read from prepared remarks. Brandon Cole was my brother in every way that mattered. I trusted him with my company, my family, my mother's safety. He exploited that trust systematically for 15 years. Not in a moment of weakness, but as a calculated long-term plan. The financial damage to my company totaled $8 million. But the emotional damage to my family is incalculable. My mother, who gave Brandon nothing but love, was tracked like an animal and used as leverage. That betrayal will haunt all of us for years to come." Trevor sat down, his shoulders shaking. Beth wrapped an arm around him, signing comfort against his back. Then Dorothy stood. The courtroom went quiet. She'd insisted on giving her statement in ASL, with Keisha translating aloud. Judge Hendricks had approved, understanding the significance. Dorothy's hands moved slowly, deliberately. Keisha's voice gave them sound. "I loved Brandon Cole like my own son. When my daughter died, when my husband died, Brandon helped fill the emptiness they left. I thought I was saving him by giving him a family. Instead, I enabled his worst impulses by giving him access to the people he wanted to hurt." Dorothy paused, gathering herself. Brandon was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. "But I want the court to know something else. Brandon's father, Robert Cole, was not guilty of the embezzlement charges that sent him to prison. I discovered this truth 3 months ago when I hired investigators to review the case. Robert was framed by my late husband's business partner, a man named Gerald Finch, who embezzled the money and planted evidence pointing to Robert. My husband prosecuted an innocent man because he believed his partner over the evidence." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. Trevor's head whipped around to stare at his mother. Brandon's face showed pure disbelief. "I cannot undo what my husband did," Dorothy continued signing. "I cannot give Brandon back his father or his childhood. But I can tell the truth. Robert Cole died in prison for a crime he didn't commit. That injustice created Brandon's rage. And while Brandon's actions were his own choice, they grew from legitimate pain. I'm asking the court to consider that when determining his sentence. Not to excuse what he did, but to understand why he did it." Dorothy sat down heavily. Trevor gripped her hand, his expression complex. Proud of her courage. Devastated by the revelation about his father. Angry at the entire mess. Keisha squeezed Dorothy's other hand. They'd spent hours discussing whether Dorothy should reveal this information. It meant tarnishing her late husband's reputation. It meant admitting that Brandon's rage had some foundation in reality. But Dorothy had insisted. Truth mattered more than protecting comfortable lies. The judge reviewed documents silently for several minutes. Then she addressed Brandon directly. "Mr. Cole, stand please." Brandon stood, his legs shaking. "I've reviewed the evidence extensively. I've read the victim impact statements. And I've heard Ms. Hastings' revelation about your father's wrongful conviction. None of this excuses your actions. You had 15 years to pursue legal remedies for your father's case. You chose revenge instead. You manipulated people who loved you. You violated trust in the most profound ways possible." Brandon's shoulders slumped. "However, I also recognize that your crimes were financial and emotional, not violent. You cooperated fully once arrested. And the revelation about your father's innocence provides context, if not justification, for your actions." Judge Hendricks paused, her expression grave. "On the charge of corporate espionage, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison. On wire fraud, 3 years to run concurrently. On computer fraud, 3 years concurrent. On conspiracy, 2 years concurrent. On illegal surveillance, 1 year concurrent. Total sentence, 5 years, with possibility of parole after 3 years pending good behavior." 5 years. Brandon's face went white. But Keisha knew it could have been much worse. The maximum sentence for his combined charges was over 20 years. The judge had shown the mercy Dorothy had asked for. "Additionally," Judge Hendricks continued, "I'm ordering you to pay restitution of $8 million to Hastings Technologies and to undergo mandatory psychological counseling. Upon release, you'll serve 3 years of supervised probation. Any violation will result in additional prison time." She banged her gavel. "This court is adjourned." Brandon was led away by marshals. At the last moment, he turned and looked at Dorothy. His hands came up, shaking, forming signs. "I'm sorry, Mom. I love you. I'm so sorry." Dorothy's face crumpled. She signed back. I love you too. I forgive you. Be better than your pain. Then he was gone, disappearing through a side door to begin his sentence. The courtroom emptied slowly. Journalists rushed out to file stories. Vanessa sat frozen in her seat, tears streaming silently. Trevor stood with Beth, looking lost. Raymond waited by the door, ever vigilant, even here. Keisha helped Dorothy to her feet. The older woman leaned on her heavily, exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine felt jarring after the courtroom's fluorescent coldness. Trees bloomed with new leaves. People walked past absorbed in normal lives. The world continued turning despite the drama inside. Did I do the right thing? Dorothy signed to Keisha, revealing the truth about Robert Cole. You told the truth. That's always right, even when it's hard. Trevor's father wasn't the man I thought he was. Gerald Finch confessed everything to my investigators. He's dying of cancer now, wanted to clear his conscience. He stole the money, framed Robert, and let an innocent man die in prison. My husband should have investigated more thoroughly, should have questioned Finch. But he trusted the wrong person and destroyed an innocent family. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I was married to him. I benefited from the company that conviction protected. I have Robert Cole's blood on my hands too, even if I didn't know it then. Trevor approached, having overheard through Beth's signing. Mom, Dad made his choices. You just found out 3 months ago. You can't carry guilt for something you didn't know about. But I can make it right going forward. Dorothy's signs were determined. I've already spoken with lawyers. I'm establishing a trust fund in Robert Cole's name. When Brandon is released, he'll have resources to rebuild his life properly. Not revenge money. Apology money. For what my husband did to his father. That's generous. More generous than Brandon deserves after what he did to you. Maybe. But generosity isn't about what people deserve. It's about breaking cycles of harm. Dorothy looked at her son with fierce love. Your father prosecuted Robert without mercy. Robert died bitter and broken. Brandon pursued revenge and destroyed himself in the process. I'm choosing a different path. I'm choosing to end this with grace instead of perpetuating pain. Trevor pulled his mother into a long embrace. When they separated, both had tears on their faces. They walked to the parking lot together, this expanded family. Trevor and Beth holding hands. Dorothy linking arms with Vanessa, who'd finally emerged from the courthouse. Raymond and his wife Margaret, who'd joined them for moral support. Mrs. Howell, who'd taken the day off to be present. And Keisha, who documented it all with her phone camera for the Foundation's newsletter. Lunch. Trevor suggested. I don't know about you all, but I need comfort food. They ended up at the same Italian restaurant in the North End where they'd celebrated 6 months ago. The server with pink hair recognized them immediately. The ASL family. Your usual table. They settled in, ordering too much food and talking over each other. The conversation turned to lighter topics. Keisha's classes at Boston University, where she was maintaining a perfect 4.0 while working part-time. Trevor's company, where Titan 2.0 had launched successfully and exceeded all projections. The Foundation, which had secured major grant funding and was expanding to train police departments across Massachusetts. Mrs. Howell shared that her grandson had been born deaf, and her ASL skills meant she could communicate with him from day one. You all taught me that disability isn't the problem. Lack of accommodation is. I'm grateful for that lesson, even though I fought it at first. Raymond revealed that he and Margaret were fostering a deaf teenager named Chris who'd aged out of other placements. Kid's brilliant, but the system failed him. We're learning ASL together as a family. It's challenging, but worth it. Vanessa talked about a man she'd met at a Foundation event, a deaf teacher named Aaron who was patient with her terrible signing and made her laugh. I never thought I'd date again after the scandal. But he sees me, not my brother's crimes. Beth demonstrated the new sign she'd created with Trevor for I love you but you're being ridiculous, which made everyone laugh because it was so specifically them. And Dorothy sat at the head of the table, signing conversations with everyone, her face radiant with belonging. This family she'd built from ruins. This chosen group who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger. Keisha captured another photo. This one would go beside the one from December. A visual timeline of healing, of choosing love over bitterness, of refusing to let one man's pain become everyone's prison. After lunch, they walked through the North End's narrow streets, past bakeries pumping out the smell of fresh bread, past old Italian men playing chess on sidewalk tables, past tourists taking photos and locals living their lives. Trevor pulled Keisha aside at one point. "I got the call yesterday. The scholarship board approved your proposal." "What proposal?" "The one I submitted on your behalf. Full ride to any graduate program you want after you finish your bachelor's degree. Hastings Technologies is investing in future leaders who understand accessibility, inclusion, and ethical business practices. You're our first recipient." Keisha felt tears threatening. "Trevor, I can't accept that. It's too much. It's not enough. You saved my company. You saved my relationship with my mother. You showed me what real courage looks like." His hazel eyes were serious. "Besides, this isn't charity. It's strategy. I want you running our accessibility division someday. But you need the credentials first. So take the scholarship, get the education, and come change the corporate world with me." "When you put it that way, how can I refuse?" "You can't. That's the point." Trevor grinned, looking younger and lighter than he had in months. They rejoined the group, walking together as the sun started its descent. Eventually they reached the waterfront, where boats bobbed in the harbor and seagulls screamed overhead. The same place they'd walked 6 months ago, when wounds were fresh and the future uncertain. Now those wounds were scarring. Still visible, still tender sometimes, but healing. And the future looked brighter than Keisha had dared imagine back in October, when she'd been just a maid trying to survive. Dorothy signed something to the group. Keisha translated. She wants everyone to join hands. They formed a circle on the waterfront. Dorothy in the center, the rest of them surrounding her. Hands linking together. Black and white and brown. Deaf and hearing. Rich and formerly poor. All the divisions that should have kept them separate, dissolved by choice. "I want to say something," Dorothy signed, and Keisha spoke the words. "6 months ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My second son. My faith in my judgment. My sense of safety in my own home. But I didn't lose everything. I found something better. I found all of you." She looked around the circle, meeting each person's eyes. "Trevor, you learned to truly see me instead of just accommodating me. Beth, you taught my son what real partnership looks like. Keisha, you gave me courage when I was too afraid to face the truth. Vanessa, you showed me that family can be rebuilt even after destruction. Raymond and Margaret, you model what committed love looks like. Mrs. Howell, you proved that people can change and grow. And all of you together reminded me that love is always worth the risk." Dorothy's hands trembled slightly as she continued. "Brandon made his choices. He'll face his consequences. But I refuse to let his betrayal steal my ability to trust and love. So I'm choosing all of you. As my family. As my future. As proof that grace is stronger than revenge." Mrs. Howell was crying openly. Raymond wiped his eyes discreetly. Trevor looked at his mother with such profound respect that Keisha's heart ached. They stood together as the sun set over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A family forged in crisis. Tested by betrayal. Strengthened by truth. Not perfect. Never perfect. But real. And for Keisha, who'd spent years invisible and afraid, this reality was more than enough. It was everything. Her phone buzzed with a text from her cousin Janelle. "You still working for those rich white people, or did you finally quit?" Keisha smiled and typed back. "Not working for them anymore. Living with them. Long story. Come visit and I'll explain." She looked up from her phone to find Dorothy watching her. The older woman signed a question. "Happy?" Keisha signed back without hesitation. "Yes." Finally. Completely yes. Dorothy's smile could have lit the darkening harbor. She signed one more thing, a promise and a declaration. Then we did it. We survived. We chose love. We won. And standing there with her chosen family, watching the first stars appear in the April sky, Keisha knew it was true. They had won. Not because Brandon was in prison, or because Trevor's company had survived, or because justice had been served. They'd won because they'd refused to let pain make them cruel. Because they'd chosen connection over safety. Because they'd learned each other's languages and spoken them with love. That was the real victory. The only one that mattered. Everything else was just details. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.